to have driven cable down because he told the FT that he'll vote for an easing this month if there are no signs of the economy improving after the general election. Taking a check at the commodity space, Ed Morse over at Citigroup, bullish on commodities, largely on the prospects of growth and the signing of that phase one deal, meaning that demand might pick up. WTI and Brent are pretty much flat, just a touch weaker, 58.97 on WTI, 64.87 on Brent. In terms of the oil market, of course, geopolitical risk was front and centre, but oil really holding its biggest weekly drop since July. So we did see a weekly drop last week, despite some of the spikes that we saw on the risk. Copper is steady, gold on the back foot, down 0.6%, $1,552 an ounce. So overall, you are seeing a little bit of a skew towards risk on, Roger.
Right, let's have a look at what the stocks are to watch this morning. Bloomberg's Joe Easton has joined us in our London studio. So, Joe, good morning to you. Now, Aston Martin, they've been having a rad old time. They are said to be holding funding talks with Stroll, but also Geely's got interested in them.
Yes, good morning. So Aston Martin shares jumping again today. This was after on Friday there was a report saying they're in talks with Geely of China, as you mentioned, over potential investment. And over the weekend we've had a Bloomberg report saying Lawrence Stroll, who's involved in Canadian Formula One, is also interested in investing. As you say, they've had a really bad time. We know they need around $1 billion in cash, really, according to analysts, in order to propel their brand further. So it's really kind of a lifeline for the company here. Most of their problems coming down to their debt load, which is also around £1 billion as well. So they really need that cash injection. Looks like potentially they could get some of that in the coming weeks. And as I mentioned, the stock up around 5%, adding to a 15% surge late on Friday for Aston Martin.
Meanwhile, William Hill looks like a good bet, as you might say, because their full-year adjusting operating profit is ahead of forecasts.
That's right. So William Hill surging today. That stock up around 5%, one of the best performers over in the UK. So this is partly due to sports betting results going more in the company's favour. So perhaps not enough people backing Liverpool, maybe, who are storming the Premier League at the moment, around 20 points clear. And over in the US, they're expanding their US betting in terms of the sports over there. So NFL, baseball, basketball. So that looks like it's doing quite well as well. So there should be a bit of a read across for the whole industry, with others like Ladbrokes and Paddy Power also likely to gain from this report from William Hill today.
And in the aerospace and defence zone, Woodward plans to combine with Hexcel. Tell us about that.
That's right. So this will create one of the biggest aerospace and defence companies in the world. So Woodward and Hexcel combining. They are two of the biggest suppliers to Boeing as well, which we know have been under a lot of scrutiny given the 737 MAX issues. The company says it's not because of this. This is not why they're merging, but it's to boost margins, which have been coming down in the industry. It's actually the 9th merger in the aerospace and defence sector of the past year, valued at over $1 billion. So we're likely to see some gains in companies like Rolls-Royce, BAE Systems and Thales. Could see a bit of a boost as that read across comes through into aerospace and defence today.
Joe, thanks very much. Bloomberg's Joe Easton there with stocks to watch this morning.
Let's turn back to our top stories. And anti-government protesters rallied in Iran for a second night after the government's admission it accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jet. It followed days of denying it had anything to do with the incident. The Iranian military says the plane was near a sensitive site and human error was to blame. President Rouhani apologized and said the victims' families will get compensation.
And turning to trade news, the US is looking at reviving semi-annual talks with China. They'll be used to discuss their economic relationship. In the past, the meetings were a forum to discuss specific disputes, such as China's currency policy. China's Vice Premier Liu He is heading to the US today and is set to sign phase one of a trade deal on Wednesday.
And as I was saying in the data check, gilt yields and the pound are lower after the Bank of England's Gert-Jan Vliegen said he will vote for a rate cut this month if there are no signs of the economy improving. That's according to an interview in the FT. Vliegen said the next MPC meetings are, quote, absolutely live, and the data released later this month will shape his view on whether to vote to reduce the rate to 0.5% from 0.75%.
And that UK data out this month. We get a reading of GDP numbers today. According to estimates, may have stayed flat for a second month in November. Bloomberg Economics sees 0.2% month-on-month growth. Meanwhile, a BDO report showed UK jobs postings fell by 59% last year, the most in a decade, as Brexit uncertainty whipsawed business planning.
Turning to top corporate news, and the US earnings season gets underway this week with several big banks reporting. A preview from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Bank stocks are coming off of their best year in more than 2 decades, outpacing the broader market with a 36% surge in 2019. And fourth quarter profits of the 6 biggest American lenders set for release this week will help them challenge the annual record of $120 billion set in 2018, according to analyst estimates. Strong consumer units and corporate tax cuts are fueling the gains, but there are warning signs. Estimates for 2020 are for a combined profit drop of $10 billion as global interest rates remain stubbornly low and geopolitical tensions stay high. Among the banks reporting this week, JP Morgan Chase, Citigroup, Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, BlackRock, and Wells Fargo. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now, Goldman Sachs plans to double its headcount in China over the next 5 years. We've learned that'll raise its headcount in the country to 600. The spate of hiring will hinge on Beijing fulfilling its pledges and opening up financial markets. Goldman's also planning a new asset management unit in mainland China.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in global news, here's Bloomberg's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Naira. Let's start in Taiwan, where President Tsai Ing-wen has won a landslide victory. She says it shows the people of Taiwan reject China's call for one country, two systems. President Tsai says Taiwan will continue to refuse to bow to pressure from its neighbor, but any move to formal independence is unlikely. Beijing says Taiwan is part of China, whatever happens. A volcano south of the Philippines' capital is erupting, triggering tens of thousands to evacuate. From Manila, Bloomberg's Andrea Colonzo says the airport, markets and government offices have been forced to shut.
Taal volcano, also a tourist attraction, is spewing steam and molten rock, prompting authorities to raise the second highest alert level. That means hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours. Ash from the volcanic eruption reached the capital. Manila's airport also remained closed. In Manila, Andrea Colonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
An investigation by Hong Kong's police watchdog into recent protests has revealed many shortcomings, according to a local newspaper. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports.
The 300-page report from the Independent Police Complaints Council found a failure to separate peaceful demonstrators from violent protesters, the Hong Kong Economic Journal reported on Monday. The probe also determined there was a lack of communication among frontline police officers and insufficient ceasefire guidelines when using tear gas, the paper said. Hong Kong's government has declined to meet protester demands for an independent commission of inquiry into police conduct during the protests. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And wildfires in Australia could see koalas classified as an endangered species. Bushfires have devastated huge areas of forest and bushland. An area twice the size of Switzerland is putting pressure on the government to reassess its pro-coal policies. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's personal ratings have tumbled alongside those of his administration. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Tech by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg. Roger.
Leanne, and I gather the New Zealanders have voted, or some of them have, on a petition to introduce koalas into New Zealand as a way of preserving them.
Yes, indeed. So we've seen this happen, but we must also remember it's not just koalas. They say 1 billion animals may have died in these bushfires, and a lot of habitats have been destroyed. So we've got to think of everything else that's happening too. But of course, deadly wildfires are still continuing.
Thank you so much, Leanne Gerrans, with the world news. Now, still ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, no respite as a second night of protests grip Iran after the government admits it accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner. More details on how the unrest in the Middle East is developing next. Despite all that, oil had a weekly loss, US equities had a weekly gain. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
More than just a game, baseball is big business. For the Atlanta Braves, this meant bringing a $1 billion stadium project to life through a public-private partnership, creating the Battery, a mixed-use development that turned an underdeveloped area into a thriving community.
Always on the cutting edge of community development, Cohn Resnick advises industry participants on tax credits, affordable housing, opportunity zones, and more, helping communities reach their full potential. Explore more at cohnresnick.com/MLB. Cohn Resnick, Advisory Assurance Tax. Transform your game.
If you love them enough to listen to them practice the same song on tuba,
Please be done.
over and over and over and over and over, then surely you'll check NHTSA.gov/the right seat to make sure they're correctly buckled in the back seat.
Sounds good, honey.
Check today at NHTSA.gov/the right seat. Brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk had something to celebrate. Tesla has kicked off production in China, and the company handed over the first China-made Model 3 sedans to the public. And now Tesla's growth potential in the country, it's exciting Wall Street. So still with us, it is Gene Munster of Loop Ventures. So Gene, I have to ask, again, as you sort of saw that big jump in China and the big sort of success in China, is that what you had predicted, or were they more successful than perhaps you thought they would be?
Move faster than what I thought. They had set that expectation of the Gigafactory in Shanghai being open by the end, producing cars by the end of 2019, just given Tesla's history of missing its targets. I had expected that to be sometime in the first quarter. Even at that, they did it in a year, which is remarkable, and give them credit for doing that. I think when you take a step back and think about what does that mean for the company more broadly this year, the analysts overall are kind of thinking somewhere between 30 and 100,000 vehicles from the Shanghai. But at the current rate, the current capacity, and this is surprising, is it's already producing 3,000 vehicles per week. So it can produce 150,000.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing. Time for a Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. Over to the First Word breaking news desk in Berlin for today's morning call. Here's Richard Jones. Richard, good morning.
Good morning, Roger. Asian equities are higher across the board today, with Nikkei 225 closing higher by 0.5%. The Kospi up by 1%, as was the Hang Seng, with the Shanghai Composite up by 0.75%. The E-mini S&P and E-mini Nasdaq futures are also gaining, both up 0.3%. European equities are inching higher at the open as well, with the Eurostoxx 50, the DAX, the CAC 40, and FTSE 100 all trading higher by 1 to 0.2%. Turning to the bond markets, the U.S. 10-year yield is up 1 basis point at 1.83%, with the 10-year German bond yield also 1 basis point higher at -0.19%. In the FX space, the Bloomberg Dollar Index is little changed, with the pound the biggest mover, down 0.5% versus the greenback, after dovish comments from Bank of England policymaker Gert-Jan Fliege over the weekend has raised market expectations of a near-term rate cut in the UK. Looking at the European event risk calendar today, the highlight will be several November UK data releases, including trade data, industrial and manufacturing production, construction output, and the monthly GDP reading. Italian retail sales are also released today. That's it for me. For more macro breaking news, it's SQUA Go on the Bloomberg Terminal. Roger?
Thanks very much, Richard. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Garrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. In Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has vowed to heal the divisions that have paralysed domestic politics. Sánchez has succeeded in forming a government to break 9 months of deadlock. One of the issues, a fight over independence for the Catalonia region. Now, here in the UK, MPs and MEPs hoping to publicly back a candidate in the Labour leadership contest have until today to do so. Rebecca Long-Bailey Haley, Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips and Keir Starmer have confirmed their place after getting the required backing of at least 22 of their colleagues. Clive Lewis and Emily Thornberry have also declared their interest to replace Jeremy Corbyn. And finally, the Duke of Sussex will come face to face with the Queen later when senior royals meet at Sandringham to discuss Harry and Meghan's future. The Duchess is with their son Archie in Canada, but it's likely she'll join the talks by phone. They're expected to discuss issues including funding for the couple, their security, and how their transatlantic lifestyle will actually work. Global News 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, I have to confess, I've deliberately avoided reading every detail of this story, but even I have not been able to ignore the outrage that it's generated.
I've been completely sucked in. I've read it all.
It's a future episode of The Crown being written in front of our eyes.
Right.
That's what we need to know.
But actually, like you say, I think the British public have been really saddened by this in lots of ways, and they've really responded. So it does show that there is much love for the royal family.
In some places, let's say.
In some.
Places. Right, okay, well, let's move on to one of our top stories, which is anti-government protests rallying in Iran for a second night. That's after Tehran admitted its military accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jetliner. The Iranian army blamed human error days after denying it anything to do with the incident that killed 176 people. Let's get more on this story now from Dubai, where Bloomberg reporter Zainab Fatah joins us. Zainab, good morning to you now. Are the protests that are going on in Iran different from protests which we've seen recently?
Good morning. Well, definitely they're different, but they're also fueled by the same in a way. So while a lot of people, the families of those who were lost in the plane crash are definitely outraged, there is a wider anger within Iran over the way the government handled this whole catastrophic incident when they shot down the Ukrainian plane, which was full of Iranian citizens and also Canadians and others from elsewhere who were also from Iran originally, many of them. So the accountability wasn't there from the beginning. The regime lied initially. They said it's a psychological warfare. It was a technical issue before they finally admitted to the fact that they shot down this plane.
Zainab, good to speak to you. If this ends up becoming a political embarrassment for Iran, how could this impact US-Iran relations in light of the latest tensions? Is it likely to lead to de-escalation or the opposite?
Well, right now, President Trump has warned the Iranian leaders not to kill protesters, not to shut the internet as they've done in previous demonstrations by the public. Remember, only a couple of months ago, Iran was dealing with huge demonstrations in many cities, a lot more larger than this actually, and those were dealing with the cost of living and the pain that the sanctions are inflicting on the daily lives of Iranians in that country. So there is a lot of anger and there is a lot of hesitation in terms of how to deal with this among the regime leaders now, because they don't want to increase the anger on the streets by cracking down too hard. At the same time, they don't want to allow this to go on for too long.
And I suppose the key in all this, as often is in Iran, is who gains? Is it the hardliners? Is it the people around Khamenei? Or is it those around the foreign minister Javad Zarif and his more supporters and the President Rouhani? Who do you think is gaining at the moment from it?
There is a lot of anger in Iran over the issues that the Iranian people are having to deal with because of the way the regime has been dealing with outside powers and its regional influence across the Middle East. But the camps are still there. So you have the hardliners who believe that that Zarif and Rouhani haven't served Iran by agreeing to the deal with the U.S. in the first place, and the fact that Iran is back at square one. So that's strengthening the case of the hardliners. At the same time, you have a lot of the young people and people who are fed up with the situation in Iran and want Iran to move into becoming a normal country like everywhere else without all these sanctions and all these issues. So the struggle is real and it continues, and we really don't know who's going to come out on top.
Great to have you with us. Thank you so much. Our Bloomberg reporter Zainab Fatah joining us from Dubai with the latest on the anti-government protests in Iran after Tehran admitted that it accidentally shot down the Ukrainian jet. In terms of how this has fed through to the markets, Roger, I mean, it hasn't really today. We've seen a little bit of risk on coming back. I mean, in Europe, that's been very muted. We were flat at the start of the trading session. We're still flat now.
And coming up in Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, we're going to be talking about AMP Capital, which has raised nearly $3.5 billion for a new global infrastructure fund. We're going to speak to the investment firm's global head of infrastructure equity. That's coming up here next. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minutes. Wall Street tries to get back on track this morning after a modest loss on Friday. The major averages pulled back from their all-time highs following the government's lackluster December employment report. The curtain rises on fourth quarter earnings season this week, with a number of big banks opening their books. J.P. Morgan Chase, Citigroup, and Wells Fargo report on Tuesday, followed by Bank of America, Goldman Sachs, Morgan Stanley, BNY Mellon, and PNC on Wednesday. For most banks, 2019 was a particularly good year, with financial stocks outpacing the broader market with a 36% surge. We get a broad-based reading on the holiday shopping season this week, when the government reports Thursday on December retail sales. Economists surveyed by Bloomberg expect to see a 0.3% increase from November. Inflation will also be a talking point this week. December reports on both retail and wholesale prices are on the calendar. Mark Mills, Bloomberg Radio.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
Portfolio Analyst, powered by Interactive Brokers, helps sophisticated investors understand the health of their complete financial portfolio. Portfolio Analyst is free and easy-to-use personal finance software that creates a consolidated view of banking, brokerage, and credit card accounts. Compare your consolidated portfolio against more than 200 benchmarks or create customized benchmarks for analyzing performance. Calculate time and money-weighted rates of return and use Portfolio Analyst for forecasting. Sign up for free at portfolioanalyst.com.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Imagine yourself in an unspoiled paradise, discovering the charms of a new city, or sampling street food with the locals. Fly from London to more than 160 destinations worldwide and make 2020 a year like never before with Qatar Airways, named world's best airline by Skytrax. Our incredible selection of special fares are available now. Book today at QatarAirways.com. Qatar Airways, going places together.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie.
that?
With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
8:30 a.m. in London, 9:30 if you're listening in Paris, Frankfurt or Brussels. Good morning, everyone. I'm Neera Chehich.
And I'm Roger Hearing, and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
30 minutes into the equity market open here in Europe. We're looking pretty much flat on the Stock 600, up just 0.1%. So some quite subdued trading across the regional equity benchmarks as well. The FTSE 100 on the front foot by 0.4%. Might have something to do with pound weakness. The CAC 40 up 0.2%. The DAX also trading in the green. The IBEX and FTSE MIB go nowhere. We saw some weakness in the S&P 500 on Friday. Underwhelming jobs report, but we still had a weekly gain, the 12th out of 14, and futures looked like we could see further gains today. Dow, S&P and Nasdaq futures all higher by at least 0.3%. In the bond markets, fairly quiet. The 10-year Treasury yield on a 183 handle, the 10-year Bund yield at -19, the 10-year gilt yield slips 2.5 basis points, along with the pound, which is the worst performing G10 currency in today's session. Right now we're down 0.5%, and we've dipped just below 130, 129.94. Following some dovish comments from the BOE's Gert-Jan Vlieger reported in the FT. Overall, we have seen a little bit of risk coming on. We're looking to the signing of the Phase 1 deal between the US and China today. That's led to some yuan strength, which has reverberated across some of the Asian FX space. The offshore trading at 689.47, up 0.3%. WTI holding on to a weekly loss from last week, 59.04. Brent crude trades at 64.97 unchanged, and gold down 0.6%, $1,552 an ounce. So across the broad cross-asset sweep, looking a little risk on.
Right, let's have a look at some of today's top stories. Now, protests in Iran over that shot-down jet have turned violent. Protesters say they fought with police and tear gas was fired at crowds. Over the weekend, Iran's leaders reversed themselves. They admitted that the country's military had mistakenly shot down the Ukrainian jet. President Trump warned the Iranian government not to kill protesters.
And turning to trade news, I was talking about the offshore yuan that strengthened past 690 per dollar for the first time since July. Well, the US is looking at reviving semi-annual talks with China. They'll be used to discuss the economic relationship between the two countries. In the past, the meetings were a forum to discuss specific disputes, such as China's currency policy. China's vice premier is heading to the US today and set to sign Phase 1 of a trade deal on Wednesday. The big question then becomes about enforcement.
And Goldman Sachs plans to double its headcount in China over the next 5 years. We've heard that'll raise its headcount in the country to 600. The spate of hiring will hinge on Beijing fulfilling its pledges and opening up financial markets. Goldman's also planning a new asset management unit in mainland China.
Those are your top stories. For the latest in world news, here's Leanne Gerrans. Hi, Leanne.
Good morning, Neera. Let's start in Taiwan, where President Tsai Ing-wen has won a landslide victory over her opposition challenger to clinch a second term in elections on Saturday. Bloomberg's Samson Ellis says her win has just Chinese President Xi's unification hopes.
She secured 57% of the ballots with a record-high number of votes. The result gives Tsai a strong mandate to resist China's pressure on the island, leaving Chinese President Xi Jinping's stated goal of bringing Taiwan under Beijing's control further out of reach. Investors were generally positive on the outcome, sending the benchmark TAIEX to a 0.6% gain. In Taipei, Samson Ellis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to the Philippines, where thousands of people are being evacuated after a volcano erupted just 40 miles south of the capital. It's triggered earthquakes and spewed ash across Manila. Financial markets are suspended. Experts warn a, quote, hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours today. There are emergency plans to move up to 200,000 people. And wildfires in Australia could see koalas classified as an endangered species. Bushfires have devastated huge areas of forest and bushland, an area twice the size of Switzerland. It's putting pressure on the government to reassess its pro-coal policies. Prime Minister Scott Morrison's personal ratings have tumbled alongside those of his administration. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now let's turn to a story breaking this hour on the Bloomberg terminal. AMP Capital has raised $3.4 billion for a new global infrastructure fund. That makes it the latest investment firm to raise a pool of capital dedicated to the burgeoning sector. Joining us now in the London studio, we're delighted to welcome Bo Pahari, Global Head of Infrastructure Equity at AMP Capital. Bo, great to have you with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about investor demand for alternative assets like infrastructure funds. Can you quantify for us what kind of demand you're seeing among investors at the moment?
Thank you, Nera. It's nice to be here. Yeah, look, there's a significant amount of demand out there today for alternative assets. I mean, basically, as you'd appreciate, with the yield hunger that we're seeing in the marketplace today, assets, real businesses with real assets that are underpinning operating models are in huge demand because you're generating equity returns which are over and above the normal yield. As a result, I would say to quantify it would be difficult, but we're talking hundreds of billions of dollars that are going into the infrastructure space itself. And of course, the real estate, there's been a significant demand in real estate. What we're seeing now is an increase in the entire private markets or private equity space. To give you an example, infrastructure, whatever we raise, there's probably about 6 or 7 times more money being raised in the whole private equity world. So between the public markets and the private markets, there's a shift to private markets to build, if you like, abnormal profits through a lot of asset management and intensity in business operating models.
Why do you think infrastructure is so big as a thing? I mean, we're just reading some figures here. Infrastructure funds raised in 2019, apparently $98 billion overall. That's according to Prekin. I mean, these are extraordinary amounts, really, for this area, aren't they?
Look, infrastructure is an emerging asset class. It's probably been around for about 20 years as the government in different parts of the world, UK, Canada, Australia in particular, started privatizing, and then Europe followed as well. So the privatization gave way to a large secondary market in the infrastructure space. But we have to remember that infrastructure is what is essential to urban living. And urban living continues to change over time. So 20 years ago, toll roads and bridges and utilities were absolutely key to our existence. But today, 20 years on, that has become a subset of the broader investable universe. And if you think about that, today, fiber optics to support mobile phones or data transmission, massive amounts of data that's moving around the world, the logistics business through the large organizations like Amazon, etc. All of that has changed completely in the last 20 years. So we're seeing communications infrastructure is a very big area. The traditional area remains, of course, very strong. But then you've got areas like health, because you've got basic disruption that's happening in the markets today, in the world today. You've got aging populations. You've got massive communication needs. You've got massive globalization, the need for energy to build new cities or the rural to urban migration to support those things.
Yeah.
So in these 4 areas, you'll continue to see more and more opportunity for investors to go in. And as I said before, it all starts with the demand, meaning the need for yield and return for long-term pensioners and the annuity return that you need, as well as the need for infrastructure itself as the world changes dramatically over the last 20 years.
Yeah, Bo, I was about to ask how dependent the growth of your fund is on global growth and also fiscal spending in, for example, China or Europe. And then when you mentioned communications, my mind jumped to the future of 5G. Talk a little bit about what the big growth drivers are. I know you touched on some of them there, but you talk about your approach bringing a private equity style rigor to infrastructure investing. What's going to drive the growth for you in the next 5 years?
Paradoxically, what we've seen in the last 10 years is that through the fiscal austerity measures that we've seen in the OECD countries, private investment infrastructure has actually mobilized even more. So it's kind of counterintuitive. Yes, governments do want to mobilize pension funds and other pools of capital, whether it be sovereign funds or insurance companies or private banks, high net worth individuals, all those areas looking for yield. Governments are looking to try and incentivize investing in infrastructure because, one, infrastructure adds to the circle of flow and employment very, very quickly. As you know, the three most sensitive areas for electoral success are health, education, and infrastructure. So it's a very important area for government from an electoral perspective. That's one. The second part is, of course, the emerging markets becomes a very important area because today we're watching the emergence of India, China, Brazil as the three major countries. And infrastructure is going to be key to their economic development. So investing in that space, it's a bit different. It's different to the way we invest in infra here in the OECD. But nevertheless, a lot of ourselves and our competition are moving into that part of the world to really develop the economy. And there's a great opportunity there as well. Remember that globalization will mean about 1 billion people will join us over the next 10 years on this planet. A vast majority of that will be in the emerging markets. So to support what is essential to urban living, you're going to need infrastructure in that area as well.
Okay, Bo, thank you so much for being with us. Bo Bahari there, Global Head of Infrastructure Equity at AMP Capital, with an announcement that they've raised $3.4 billion for their new Global Infrastructure Fund.
Yeah, and raising capital from more than 60 institutional clients, including family offices. Interesting conversation. Thank you so much for joining us. We are 40 minutes into the equity market open meanwhile, and again, not really going anywhere on the Stock 600 on this Monday morning. We're seeing gains, though, of 0.2%, so starting to edge into the green. This is Bloomberg.
Three, two, one. Oh no. Which button am I?
When every second counts, you can't wing it.
Guys, a little help up here?
In a home fire, you may have less than 2 minutes to get out. So make a family home fire escape plan. Then practice home fire drills at least twice a year so everyone knows what to do when they hear. Prepare your family at ready.gov/fire drill. Brought to you by FEMA, the Ad Council, and Make Safe Happen.
Investors who put their money on the line to help build U.S. infrastructure deserve to be protected. That's what we do at BAM. Our unconditional guarantee means investors receive every payment of interest and principal when due, period. BAM insured bonds have a high AA stable rating from S&P, and BAM credit profiles provide complete transparency on each and every transaction. BAM insured bonds help build America's essential public projects. BAM, the feeling is mutual.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Imagine yourself in an unspoiled paradise, discovering the charms of a new city, or sampling street food with the locals. Fly from London to more than 160 destinations worldwide and make 2020 a year like never before with Qatar Airways, named world's best airline by Skytrax. Our incredible selection of special fares are available now. Book today at QatarAirways.com. Qatar Airways, going places together.
At Ring, we've reinvented the doorbell. So no matter where you are or what time of day, you can watch over your home and the things you care about. Ring Video Doorbell streams HD video and two-way talk straight to your phone, so you can speak to whoever's at your door from anywhere.
Delivery.
Oh, great. Could you leave it with my neighbour, please?
Sure, no problem.
And it's so simple, you can install it yourself in minutes. See, hear and speak to whoever's at your door from wherever you are with Ring Video Doorbell. Available at ring.com and selected retailers.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters in London, I'm Roger Hearing with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. And after a reasonably positive session in the Asian markets, Europe, it's been, drifting really. Stock 600 fluctuated, declines in mining shares offset gains in tech. Stock 600 up to 1/10%, FTSE 100 up 0.4%. The CAC up 0.25%, the DAX the same. The IBEX barely moved at all. And looking to the US opening, S&P, E-mini and Dow futures up 0.3%, NASDAQ up 0.5%. A bit more optimism perhaps building there. Keeping an eye on oil, WTI 59.05, barely moved. 64.99 is where we find Brent, also barely moved. Earlier, of course, with Japan being closed, US Treasuries weren't trading. But now, within the past hour, US 10-year Treasuries 1.83, that's up 1 basis point. And keeping an eye on cable, cable now just down below the 1.3 mark, 1.2996 is where we find it, probably based on those suggestions by one at least of the Bank of England policymakers that a rate cut might be round the corner. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Leanne Gerrans with more on what's going on around the world. Leanne.
Roger, good morning. Many shortcomings, that's the conclusion of a report into Hong Kong police conduct during recent unrest. The Hong Kong Economic Journal says the investigation finds a lack of communication and no clear guidelines when firing tear gas. The report hasn't yet been officially released. It could be made public in the next few weeks. Emmanuel Macron's decision to ditch efforts to make 64 the baseline age for full pension benefits may be the move that finally allows the French president to push through reforms. After a month of strikes and disruption to train services is likely to ease today as some union leaders embrace the new plan that may boost broader public support for proposed reforms. And finally, questions about the Duke and Duchess of Sussex's future, including how they'll pay for their lifestyles, will be discussed by the Queen later. Her Majesty, Prince Harry, Prince William and Prince Charles will discuss what lies ahead for the couple after announced they want to step back from senior royal duties. Their historic meeting will take place at Sandringham. Global News 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Bloomberg Naira.
Leanne, thank you so much. Now let's turn to our guest for the hour. Joining us in the London studio, Kamal Sharma, Director of G10 FX Strategy at Bank of America Merrill Lynch Global Research. Welcome, Kamal. Is it too late to say Happy New Year? I've not seen you yet in 2020.
We'll give it the last shot today.
Yeah.
Good morning, Naira. Good morning, Roger.
Good morning.
So let's look ahead to 2020 because last year you were bearish, the dollar across the board. Do you sort of stay bearish the dollar given some of the risks that have come to the fore at the start of this year, namely geopolitical risks? I know that we've kind of had risk on come back, and actually we ended last week with US equities higher, oil lower. But are you in any way tempted to reconsider your bearish dollar call as we start 2020?
No, I think we're still very comfortable with the bearish dollar call. I think the only caveat that I would say is that if you're looking for the slam dunk this year in terms of the big dollar move, it's not likely to come. If you look at our year-end forecast for euro dollar, it's 115. It's not significantly away from where we are at current levels. But I think this year is going to be one that's going to be dictated by quite a few twists and turns. And from the client interactions that I have, the one big shadow this year is going to be the US presidential elections, and particularly starting on Super Tuesday when we have the Democrats Democrats runoff. Now, if we start to see somebody like a Bernie Sanders or an Elizabeth Warren, I think the market then has to quite logically price those in. And we, as the FX market community, probably will be taking our cue from the equity markets. They have been resilient, as you've said. We have got some of the event risk out of the way, namely the US-China trade war. The deal should be signed today. But then we've obviously encountered US-Iran as well.
But what about the Fed? Because, I mean, there's lots of interesting developments in terms of what people are speaking, and obviously the sense that, yes, they are on course for holding the pattern. That's the official line. But interestingly, I think it was Bloomberg Intelligence, say investors pricing an 86% probability of a Fed rate cut by the end of this year, despite the central bank's dot plot suggesting no change. I mean, that seems extraordinary.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's just a function of the fact that the economy is likely to slow this year. Having said that, if you look at the non-farm payrolls number on Friday, it was a relatively Goldilocks number, relatively good pace of employment growth, relatively weak average earnings. The inflationary side of that equation isn't likely to trigger anything significant from the Fed. Do they cut? Well, that really depends on what happens to overall financial conditions. I think it's very important to emphasize that the Fed tracks financial conditions rather than the equity markets per se. If we have a tightening of credit spreads, we have another risk-off event, then that may push them. But we're comfortable with our view at the moment that the Fed rate stays on hold for the rest of the year.
Goldilocks jobs number, interesting. I want to ask about how you're sort of viewing the implications of Iran geopolitical risk for emerging markets, because this is a topic in your outlook. And one thing that sort of happened is we've had oil price moves really come back to haunt some Asian currencies. So volatility increasing for the rupee, for the won, for the Philippine peso as well. Is that how you view EM, through the prism of oil price swings, or are there other implications, for example, just of simple risk on, risk off, affecting the EM basket as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, we're constructive broadly, Nera, on emerging markets. The currencies that you've highlighted are those that have historically had fundamentally weak positions. India is a very prime example. Large current account, large fiscal deficit, and an oil price shock obviously has an impact on those currencies. But more broadly, we think there is scope for further gains in the likes of the South African rand. We're constructive more broadly on EM. We think for now that the Iran-US situation is relatively well contained. And obviously the crucial thing is going to be, does it have a knock-on impact on the data? And so far, we've not seen any significant signs of that happening either in the US or more broadly in the global economy.
Moving on to the euro, where do you, in 2020, where do you see the euro in terms of its strength? Because we are in an interesting moment with the ECB, the new leadership, of course, not really new anymore. We're talking if it's new still. Christine Lagarde, we're getting the review of their operations, everything else. What strength do you see in 2020?
Again, I think, Roger, it's important to remember that we are expecting some appreciation of the euro this year. But the key point that we're highlighting to investors this year is that the euro is going to be structurally undervalued. It's been undervalued for a number of years. Now, there's a number of reasons. The ECB's quantitative easing policy, the fact that, the currency is being used as de facto policy weapon as well. And the economy remains very, very, very weak. Now, for us, the binary event is if you see an uptick in China's business investment spending and China growth, then that's going to help European exports in the absence of any significant fiscal policy stimulus, which we don't think is coming. Now, the key here is whether Lagarde can persuade the ECB, the rest of the European governments to start pulling the trigger on fiscal policy. It's a high bar. It's unlikely to happen. And therefore, I think what you could say the best for the euro area economy is that it stumbles through, it just struggles through low growth, relatively low inflation. The ECB is happy to keep quantitative easing going, leave rates on hold.
In the 3 minutes we've got left, Kamal, I'll leave Roger to ask about the pound. But given that you mentioned China in relation to the Eurozone there, I'm wondering how constructive you are on Chinese growth and the prospects of a US-China deal beyond phase one. Today we've seen the yuan strengthen past 690 for the first time since July. Some analysts see the yuan as strong as 680 per dollar in the first quarter. Your take?
Yeah, well, I think, last week our Chinese economists actually upgraded our growth forecasts. So that's the first positive. I think it's 5.8% now. So that's the first positive sign that we've had. It's easy to forget that heading into 2020, expectations about global growth are on the floor. So anything that was a slight surprise has been enough for analysts around the world to upgrade their forecast, and China is no exception. The US-China trade deal was part of our base case scenario, so it should help the Chinese renminbi. Do we get through to a phase two? I think there's going to be a bit of cat of mouse here between the Chinese and the US. Trump will obviously want to push forward with that. The Chinese will probably want to wait until a new president is elected. So it's not probably going to be the intensity that we saw in 2019, largely because the US president wants a strong economy and a strong equity market heading into the presidential elections.
Well, talking of political effects, yes, I will talk about the pound because it is rather fascinating. We had Vlicha, of the Bank of England, talking about potential of a rate cut. The pound, I mean, literally this morning, just fractionally popped below cable on just below 1.3. It's back above 1.3, but marginally at the moment. Clearly, I guess in reaction to what's happened in terms of speculation about cuts. Where do you see the pound?
So I think the important point to note in the near term is that we've had a quite significant shift in the Bank of England's rhetoric. And if you add Saunders, Haskell to Tenreiro, Carney, and Vliga, that's a 5-4 split for a rate cut. Now, we still hold on to the view that we're going to see a May rate cut. Admittedly, the risks are of a January rate cut. The market's now pricing in, I think, 11, 12 basis points. This week is going to be very significant for the pound in terms of the data. We've got GDP monthly data today, IP, inflation, and retail sales. Does the Brexit narrative really matter at the moment? No, because the options market is telling you that there's a significant compression in vol premium for sterling options, and therefore I think the market now really will be trading the UK macroeconomic data. The disappointment, I think, is going to be, or has been, that we haven't seen a Boris bounce, a post-general election bounce in the data. Most of the numbers have been coming out, have been on the softer side of expectations. Now, if that continues, then as Vliga said, the Bank of England has no option but to cut rates.
Just briefly, Kamal, are you putting on any vol trades ahead of the data this week in an expectation of a spike in vol?
We've actually got one long-term vol trade on at the moment. We're long euro-dollar volatility relative to euro stocky volatility. It's an RV play because we've observed that euro-dollar volatility, the spread has never been this low. We think that's some capacity for that to rise.
Thank you very much indeed. Kamal Sharma there, Director of G10 FX Strategy at Bank of America Global Research. Anna Edwards and Matt Miller coming here next. This is Bloomberg.
Why do so... Sometimes in business, you have to take risks, but trading across borders and currencies shouldn't be one of them. With Western Union Business Solutions, we can help you manage the risk of doing business internationally. Our valuable experience, expert knowledge, and extensive global network makes us the ideal trusted partner for your business. And with our customer-focused support team, you'll receive a dedicated solution and personalized service. Visit westernunionbusiness.com. Western Union Business Solutions, a global financial network you can trust.
Imagine yourself in an unspoiled paradise, discovering the charms of a new city, or sampling street food with the locals. Fly from London to more than 160 destinations worldwide and make 2020 a year like never before with Qatar Airways, named world's best airline by Skytrax. Our incredible selection of special fares are available now. Book today at QatarAirways.com. Qatar Airways, going places together.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
What we're now seeing for the first time is this facade of absolute unity beginning to break down in the EU.
We expect that there will be some type of slowdown recession beyond 2019.
The European banking system, although recovering, hasn't recovered, and there are areas of fragility.
We've seen this before, trade talks that lead nowhere, and then tariffs. We just swing from one to the other, and markets get caught in the middle.
Bloomberg Daybreak Europe with Anna Edwards and Matt Miller on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning from London. I'm Anna Edwards.
And good morning from Berlin. I'm Matt Miller. You're listening to Daybreak Europe on London DAB Digital Radio.
Yes, you are. And we check the markets every 15 minutes on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe. So let's get straight to that. The Stock 600 up by 0.1%, but that doesn't tell the whole story of what we're seeing here in Europe, it would seem, because the FTSE 100 up by just shy of 0.5%. There's an FX angle there. We'll come to that in a moment. The CAC 40 up by 0.25% and the Xetra DAX up by 0.1%. Some of the weakness coming through in the peripheral European markets, so the IBEX and the FTSE MIB a little under pressure. US futures, so the expectations of where we head at the start of US stock trading, they are positive, up by between 3 and 0.4% for the major indexes over in the United States. Let's get to the FX markets. I mentioned there's an angle there when it comes to the pound. The dollar overall is fairly flat to positive. The pound is weaker though, down by 0.4%. So flirting it once again with that 130 level on cable. So this is the pound against the US dollar. We've seen Gert-Jan Vlieger adding his fairly dovish voice to some recent comments we heard from Tenreo and from Mark Carney himself. Gert-Jan Vlieger over the weekend saying that he could go along with an interest rate cut at the end of this month if there are no signs that the economy is improving. We'll get some thoughts on that shortly, but it does seem as if the market is quickly having to price in something a little bit more dovish. Maybe not in January, but maybe a little bit later on in the year. We'll talk about that later. So that's the big move in the FX markets for you. We see some fairly sizable move in bond markets as well. The US 10-year yields at 1.84%, so a little bit of a selling of fixed income, and the bond yield goes higher there. The oil price turning an earlier loss in session here in Europe into a gain, up by just 0.2%, though still around that $65 a barrel mark on Brent. 65.08 is where we trade. Matt?
All right, now let's get to, you were talking about the Bank of England there. Let's get to some FX news and eco news with our next guest, Viraj Patel. He's an FX and global macro strategist at Arcara and also a former employee of the Bank of England. What do you expect, Viraj, from the UK data that we're going to get this week and from the Bank of England? Because as our Richard Jones just told us, the expectations have gone from over the last week from basically nothing to a cut.
Yeah, I think it's highly unusual in terms of the timing and the communication strategy from the Bank of England, especially coming out straight after the election, ahead of potentially some important March budget to start talking up potentially cutting rates. Our central scenario is that we think both the soft and hard data in the UK will dispel any immediate BOE growth concerns and the need to cut rates immediately. And I think if anything, that we might start to see sort of the rates correct a bit here in flatline. I think it's an interesting sort of inflection point for the UK economy. You've got the biggest stumbling block, which has been investment for the past couple of years since Brexit, and the dynamics around that starting to sort of tick to the upside, both from a lower Brexit and global uncertainty perspective. You've also got a slow recovery in global trade and manufacturing, which is quite supportive, and one could imagine sort of easy monetary policy in the globe providing a bit of support to investment. So, the investment channel, which has been the big stumbling block to UK growth, looks to potentially be unlocked this year in 2020, especially if you've got add on top of that potential for fiscal stimulus coming from the new UK government. So all of that suggests to me that the bank should wait and hold. But the timing of the communications in recent weeks has been very, very interesting.
Yeah, there does seem to be a sort of wave of it coming, doesn't there? Taking on board your point about looking for data to surprise on the upside and then dispel this talk of rate cuts, then, Viraj, I was looking at the data calendar we've got coming in the UK. January 13th, we get monthly GDP, but that's for November, and that's of little use, isn't it? Because what we're really waiting for is anything that tells us how the economy has done post-December the 12th, whether there really was any kind of uptick post-election. So I suppose then we look to January 15th and 16th when we get inflation data for December and RICS data on the housing market for December. But even then, you've got the pre-election period it's going to be noisy.
Yeah, I think there's enough sort of reasons for the bank to sort of wait and see this period out. Look, initial survey data from we've got quarterly data surveys from financial firms coming out this today, suggesting a bit of uptick in sort of hiring intentions and investment plans. You've also got the content from the agents in the Bank of England as well, who probably will be reporting a bit of optimism kicking through. Look, if we can get through the 31st of January with a trade sort of the divorce deal out of the way, I think some of the hype around Brexit risks have potentially overstated right now. It's a long way to the end of 2020. So I think there's enough for me for markets to have overreacted in the short term. I think this is a great opportunity for at least to initiate fresh sterling longs, because the broader backdrop still supports sort of cable trading at 136, 138 later this year.
What do you expect from the euro?
Euro dollar for us is it's the flat as anything really. I think the volatility in euro dollar, we expect it to actually stay low. I think it's easy to sort of pick a breakout and potentially a break to the downside, or even like the cyclical recovery in the eurozone, which many sort of are expecting to see euro dollar at 115. I just don't see either scenario as likely. I think we're probably going to straddle this world of 110, 115, and bounce in this area, and that's great for sort of where EM assets come in. So both the euro and the dollar flat, being used as funding currencies to put capital to work in sort of high risky assets. I think that's the backdrop that we'll see in the first half of this year.
Yeah, we were looking at this chart earlier on Bloomberg TV, weren't we, Viraj, about the euro falling to its lowest ever level against emerging market currencies, and you suggested there's more of that to come.
Yeah, I think one thing that we'll see from Europe this year is that even if we do, and I think the missing piece for any rally in European risk assets is fiscal stimulus, but what you'll see from the ECB is not the same mistake that the Fed made in 2018. So you'll see the ECB keeping rates lower for longer, even in the backdrop of potential small, modest fiscal stimulus from European governments, and that sort of nexus does provide support for risk over sort of chasing Eurozone short-term rates higher.
In terms of the yen, I've noticed we're back up to 110 almost. Even though we have all this geopolitical concern, it doesn't look like anybody's hiding out there. What do you expect from the Japanese currency?
Yeah, I think for the past couple of months, we've noticed that this is not the same yen that we're used to, maybe 2, 3, or even pre-crisis. I think, two things have changed here. One, there are better, safer assets out there, people sort of not using FX, but more sort of precious metals, in particular gold. So we think gold is the new yen going into sort of this year. If one was to sort of diversify and look for safer assets. But equally, yen funded carry trades have just diminished completely over the past couple of years. So portfolio flows in that sense have kind of already unwound. So when you get risk-off episodes, there's very little flight or repatriation anymore, because it just isn't the same sort of world that we were used to pre-crisis, where there was a lot of yen-funded carry trade. So I think right now, those dynamics means that the yen is really subject to what the dollar does, and also just the general global risk environment. And it's just, unfortunately, it's not the world for it's not the year for the yen anymore.
Not the year for the yen. Is it the year for the yuan then? The Chinese currency, has it fair, Viraj? Because we've seen it gain momentum into the signing of the Phase 1 trade deal. It could play a starring role in the Phase 1 trade deal.
I think it will be central to any sort of future US-China trade deal and arrangements, especially going into trade 2. I think it's an interesting geopolitical angle here, because on the flows perspective, as noted, the purchases of Chinese goods for purchase of Chinese US goods means that you've got natural dollar demand there. And I think on the flip side, you've got the authorities, especially for Washington, asking China to keep the currency stable. So you've got these sort of offsetting flows here and contradicting.
Yeah, so offsetting even within the Phase 1 deal itself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so, it's an interesting dichotomy especially for Beijing to navigate. And I think what they'll look to do ahead of the US presidential elections is keep the currency as stable as possible. They won't try to engineer too much upside, because they understand, from a trade weighted perspective, the currency is still slightly overvalued, but not look to sort of play to any sort of fears that could unwind or destabilize the progress that we've seen over the past couple of months.
All right, Viraj, thanks so much for joining us today on Bloomberg Television and Bloomberg Radio. Viraj Patel is an FX and global macro strategist at Arcara.
Let's get the latest in global news. Here's Bloomberg's Roger Hearing.
Thanks, Anna. Mass protests in Iran for a second night after the government admits it accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jet. That follows days of denying it had anything to do with the incident. The Iranian army says the plane was near a sensitive military site and human error was to blame. Tehran says the victims' families will be compensated. In Taiwan, where President Tsai Ing-wen has won a landslide victory, she says it shows the people of Taiwan reject China's call for one country, two systems. President Tsai says Taiwan will continue to refuse to bow to pressure from its neighbor, but any move to formal independence is unlikely. Beijing says Taiwan is part of China, whatever happens. A volcano south of the Philippines capital is erupting, triggering tens of thousands of people to evacuate. From Manila, Bloomberg's Andrea Colonzo says the airport, markets and government offices have been forced to shut.
Taal volcano, also a tourist attraction, is spewing steam and molten rock, prompting authorities to raise the second highest alert level. That means hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours. Ash from the volcanic eruption reached the capital. Manila's airport also remained closed. In Manila, Andrea Colonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And an investigation by Hong Kong's police watchdog into recent protests has revealed many shortcomings, according to a local newspaper. Bloomberg's Ian Marlowe reports.
The 300-page report from the Independent Police Complaints Council found a failure to separate peaceful demonstrators from violent protesters, the Hong Kong Economic Journal reported on Monday. The probe also determined there was a lack of communication among frontline police officers and insufficient ceasefire guidelines when using tear gas, the paper said. Hong Kong's government has declined to meet protester demands for an independent commission of inquiry into police conduct during the protests. In Hong Kong, Ian Marlowe, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Leanne Gerrans. This is Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Thanks very much, Roger. Now with your morning sports news, here's William Essler.
Manchester City's Sergio Aguero broke two Premier League records yesterday in their 6-1 win over Aston Villa. He now has the most hat-tricks in the division's history and the most goals by a non-English player. Watford are out of the Premier League's relegation zone for the first time all season. They were 3-0 winners at Bournemouth yesterday, and the points moved them to 17th in the table. A frenetic South Wales derby between Cardiff and Swansea finished goalless in the Championship yesterday. The point was enough to move the visitors to the capital up to 7th in the table. Outside of the playoff spots, only on goal difference. Cardiff are 12th, 4 points off the top 6. And Leicester are through to the quarter-finals of Rugby Union's European Challenge Cup. They overturned a half-time deficit to beat Cardiff 30-20 at Welford Road. For the Welsh side, their hopes of progression are now out of their own hands. Cardiff will need to beat Cavasano next Saturday and hope Leicester beat Pau to have any chance of reaching the knockout stage.
All right, let's get the U.S. sports now with Pete Fox. Pete?
From the day in the NFL, divisional round action in Kansas City, the Houston Texans grabbed a 24-0 lead on the Chiefs before they knew what hit them. And before the Texans knew what hit them, the Chiefs were up 10, scoring 34 unanswered. Patrick Mahomes throwing for 5 touchdowns. Travis Kelce, 134 in the air and 3 touchdowns as the Chiefs ultimately cruised to victory, 51-31. They now face the Titans at Arrowhead in the AFC Championship game. And in the late game at Lambeau, the Packers led 21-3 at the half. They hold on for a 28-23 win after Russell Wilson rallied the Hawks in the second half with 3 touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers threw for 2. Devontae Adams caught both of them, and Aaron Jones ran for 2. They now face the Niners in the NFC Championship game at Levi's. I'm Pete Fox. That's your Bloomberg NBC World Sports Update.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients, and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Inovalon is a leading provider of cloud-based platforms empowering data-driven healthcare. Leveraging deep connectivity, the data of billions of medical events, and advanced analytics, Inovalon empowers the achievement of improved clinical outcomes and financial performance for thousands of health insurance companies, hospitals, doctors, pharmacies, and pharmaceutical companies, and the millions of patients they serve every day. Inovalon. Data has a story to tell. We give it a voice. Learn more at Inovalon.com.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Influential conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk had something to celebrate. Tesla has kicked off production in China, and the company handed over the first China-made Model 3 sedans to the public. And now Tesla's growth potential in the country, it's exciting Wall Street. So still with us, it is Gene Munster of Loop Ventures. So Gene, I have to ask, again, as you sort of saw that big jump in China and the big sort of success in China, is that what you had predicted, or were they more successful than perhaps you thought they would be?
Moved faster than what I thought. They had set that expectation of the Gigafactory in Shanghai being open by the end, producing cars by the end of 2019, just given Tesla's history of missing its targets. I had expected that to be sometime in the first quarter. Even at that, they did it in a year, which is remarkable, and give them credit for doing that. I think when you take a step back and think about what does that mean for the company more broadly this year, the analysts overall are kind of thinking somewhere between 30 and 100,000 vehicles from the Shanghai. But at the current rate, the current capacity, and this is surprising, is it's already producing 3,000 vehicles per week. So it can produce 150,000.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app, or check your local cable listings.
Markets, headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So in terms of the markets, what we're looking at the moment is European equities currently trading on the European markets just slightly lower. So the tensions over the Middle East seem to be abating somewhat in the markets as we look ahead to a week that is going to be marked by the big results in terms of corporate earnings from US investment banks and also, of course, the signing of the US-China Phase 1 trade deal. Currently, the FTSE 100 is up by 0.4%, unlike the US Stock 600, which, as I say, is just slightly in negative territory. The Xetra DAX, though, is also slightly down this morning. In terms of the Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index, that gains 0.1%. The pound is weaker, slumping 0.6%. So we're below the 130 handle, 1.2983. The discussion from MPC members appears to be pointing firmly towards more easing, or the start of easing from the UK central bank. That had seemed to be off the table, but there certainly seems to be an effort to point towards that now, and that's why you see the pound at the moment slightly weaker. The euro trades at 1.1122, so barely in positive territory. WTI crude oil trades at $59.19, so up at 0.25%, and Brent crude at $65.17. This as gold slides 0.9%. And in the bond market, after we had that massive deluge of bond auctions last week, particularly in high grade, 1.84% is where we stand for US benchmark yields, so up by 2.5 basis points, and German yields at negative 17 basis points, also higher at 2 basis points. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here is Bloomberg's Roger Hearing with the latest in world and national news. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. In Spain, Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has vowed to heal the divisions that have paralysed domestic politics. Sanchez has succeeded in forming a government to break 9 months of deadlock. One of the issues is the fight over independence for the Catalonia region. Sanchez also plans to fund more social spending with higher taxes on large companies and wealthier Spaniards. Here in the UK, MPs and MEPs are hoping to publicly back a candidate in the Labour leadership contest, and they have until today to do so. Rebecca Long-Bailey, Lisa Nandy, Jess Phillips and Keir Starmer have confirmed their places after getting the required backing of at least 22 of their colleagues. Clive Lewis and Emily Thornberry have also declared their interest to replace Jeremy Corbyn. And the Duke of Sussex will come face-to-face with the Queen later when senior royals meet at Sandringham to discuss Harry and Meghan's future. The Duchess is with their son Archie in Canada, but it's likely she'll join the talks by phone. They're expected to discuss issues including funding for the couple, their security, and how their transatlantic lifestyle will work. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 9:20 in the city. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion. We're joined by opinion columnist Anjani Trivedi, who's writing about China's Geely Group holding preliminary talks about a possible investment in British car maker Aston Martin. And Anjani, this is a company that's already got its tentacles around so much of the European car industry. What's the story?
I think, firstly, thank you for having me. But, like many other Chinese companies over the last couple of years, they were all looking to go out and see what they could buy. I think with Geely specifically, they have stuck to the car industry and broadly autos, and looking to move up the value chain, if you will, and kind of getting more of the marquee brands under their belt so that they can. Actually, they haven't been able to export cars, although they're China's largest domestic car maker, privately owned domestic car maker. So here they are looking at Aston Martin, which is, which might go for a fire sale price. But let's see where they get to.
Yeah, why do you think that this is a step too far? They clearly want to spread their wings globally in marquee brands, in luxury brands. Do they have enough of those? Is that not what's needed at Geely?
It's got to be cheap compared to, what do they have, 10% of Mercedes, of Daimler, or even 20 now? They want to get more. They own Volvo. I mean, Aston Martin must be going for a song.
But I guess, the price is one, even if they get a low price. The second question is, what value does it add to Li Shufu's auto portfolio, right? At this point, you're looking at and you also have to kind of juxtapose that to where they're getting their money from. They make money off of the domestic car market, which is struggling. So that's going to look, the outlook there is grim, and the market's going to get tougher. There's space for luxury and premium cars and so on. So there's going to be a slowdown there. Aston Martin doesn't bring that much value. Putting money behind a car maker that has a long way to recovery doesn't seem to justify the cash, even if it's a low price.
And what is Geely doing? What is Geely doing on electric vehicles then, Anjani? Because that, to some extent, seems like the future that China could shape or could get there quicker than some older driving markets. Recently they set up a JV with one of South Korea's leading battery makers, and so they're kind of going one step further in the supply chain in kind of trying to get to the battery part of the value chain. And then their Link and a lot of these other brands that they're coming out with are supposed to they're trying to look to invest in future of mobility type of companies. They've set up some JVs and some partnerships with Huawei. They're basically trying to do everything that you hear about. I mean, as cliche as it sounds, in terms of this umbrella of future of mobility, they're investing in all parts of that, including
they have the EQC at Daimler. They have Polestar, with Volvo, and the question is, what do you think AML can be? Can it turn into a Ferrari ever, right? Because race is the dream.
Yeah. Well, the question is, will Geely be turning that into, can Geely do that for them? They've helped with Volvo, but again, it's not been because of technology. Geely is the one that's working to kind of get technology from them. It's not really a two-way thing, because if it was, Geely would have cars that it was exporting, 6 years ago, but they haven't been able to export.
Hopefully James Bond will at least still drive an Aston Martin. And Johnny, thanks so much for joining us. And Johnny Trivedi there from the Bloomberg Opinion Team. This is Bloomberg.
With the Bloomberg Business of Sports Report, I'm Michael Barr. The president of the International Olympic Committee defended rules limiting Olympic protests. IOC President Thomas Bach says the political neutrality of the Olympics would be undercut if an athlete took a knee in protest on the medal podium at this year's Tokyo Games. Bach says the Olympics are not and must never be a platform to advance political or any other divisive ends. Taking a knee, making hand gestures with political meaning, and refusing to respect fellow medalists on the podium are highlighted as divisive disruption in the new guidelines. This type of controversy is not new. Back in 1968 in Mexico City during the medal ceremony, U.S. African-American sprinters Tommy Smith and John Carlos were expelled from the Olympic Games after they raised their fists with black gloves in silent protest against racial discrimination in America. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports Report. I'm Michael Barr.
Are you interested in a challenging and exciting career? One where you can be part of solving complex challenges across industries and geographies? Bloomberg's ever-expanding technology, data, news, and media services foster innovation, empower clients, and offer nearly limitless opportunities for career growth. Visit Bloomberg.com/careers today to view our current job opportunities. Bloomberg LP is an equal opportunity employer. The address once again is Bloomberg.com/careers.
In today's volatile markets, investors need resilient portfolios to help handle the pressure. Through decades of expansions and recessions and changing interest rates, clients have turned to PIMCO to help them stay on course, no matter what course markets take. PIMCO, active fixed income solutions that aim to give investors an edge. All investments contain risk and may lose value. Investing in the bond market is subject to risks. Consult your investment professional prior to making an investment.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Along the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Move, hit a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want to know a quick, easy way to see if your favorite podcasts have a new episode available? Just go to the home screen on your TuneIn app and see the latest editions under the Your New Episode section. Happy listening.
This week on the New Yorker Radio Hour, has Silicon Valley changed since all the revelations about the world's social media companies?
I think people are really reluctant to relinquish this narrative of being underdogs, of being innovators, of just trying to experiment and make the world better.
Listen to this episode of the New Yorker Radio Hour on TuneIn today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Broadcasting live to London on DAB digital radio, to New York, Bloomberg 1130, to Washington DC, Bloomberg 99.1, to Boston, Bloomberg 106.1, to San Francisco, Bloomberg 960, and around the globe, the Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Good morning from the German capital of Berlin. I'm Matt Miller.
And I'm Anna Edwards. You're listening to Bloomberg at Daybreak Europe. Let's get straight to some breaking news before we check the market reaction then, Matt. We've got breaking news coming out from the UK. UK GDP rising 0.1% in the 3 months September to November. The expectation was for a drop of 0.1%. So that is slightly better, but very backward looking. UK economy shrank 0.3% in November. The estimate was for unchanged GDP. So that November number looks a little bit weaker than expected. So something a little mixed in that, a mixed picture really coming through then from the UK economy right now. All of that perhaps fairly irrelevant though for where the pound goes. We see the pound is down by 0.7% this morning, below 130 to the dollar then, 130 on the dollar then, Matt, as we see these increasingly dovish comments coming out from Bank of England officials.
Yeah, let's take a look at the market reaction here. First off, when I look at the cable rate, I see that it continues to drive a little bit lower. Right now, 129.76. So that's interesting. And gilt yields, while they already were down, also continue to fall lower, now 0.7454. In terms of other assets, we see dollar strength against the yen. Right now you can buy 109.832 yen for the dollar, so getting ever closer to that 110 level. Even with all the geopolitical strife we had in the last week, the yen has weakened substantially. Gold also weakening at 1548.06 a troy ounce, and the U.S. 10-year yield is rising to 1.8406%. By the way, a barrel of Brent crude right now is up 12 cents to $65.11. And if you're looking for NYMEX WTI, it's up 11 cents to $59.15.
Matt, let's talk about an interesting corporate story that caught our attention this morning. Siemens says it will go ahead with a controversial contract to supply signalling systems to an Australian coal mine. Environmental protesters in Germany had called on the company to abandon the project. The Siemens CEO says he has to, quote, balance the interests of different stakeholders. For more on the story, Bloomberg reporter Oliver Sachs-Gow joins us. And Oliver, this is supplying systems to a railway that in turn supplies a coal mine. So I suppose Siemens were hoping that they would stay far enough away from the coal story itself to get this to have this one fly under the radar, but it hasn't, has it? Because protesters have been out in Germany.
Yeah, absolutely not. So Siemens actually does a lot of work in the energy business. They make gas turbines, wind turbines, things like that. But like you said, this was going to be a train signaling contract. 20 million, really small for Siemens, small enough that the CEO didn't even know about it originally. But protesters really launched upon it. Protesters have been fighting against this Carmichael coal mine for years, and they've been targeting the individual companies supplying and hoping to choke off the suppliers, and then by that get the coal mine to not get built in the first place. They turned to Siemens in December when the contract for the signaling, the rail signaling, was announced. With that, it would go to Siemens.
It's a tough time to be supportive of the coal industry, right? I mean, globally, because of the climate change issue, but especially in Australia because of the bushfires ravaging the continent. How does Joe Kaiser defend this move?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't think the optics could look any worse right now for Siemens than they already do. And Kaiser, spoke about the fires at length in a statement. He said, he really feels for the people of Australia, the wildlife, and he reiterated that he really, does think that we need to be more environmentally conscious. But that being said, he said at the end of the day, he has to, like you said, weigh the interests of his stakeholders and his shareholders. The real big thing with Joe Kaiser is that he doesn't want to disappoint his customers. That's always been true. He's always made his decisions with that in mind first, even if it comes at the cost of bad optics.
What about the broader story around Siemens at the moment then, Oliver? How high up the radar is this for the business?
Well, the contract is really small. This was going to be a Siemens mobility contract. They're trading that's already making a lot of money. They didn't really need this, but Siemens right now is undergoing a big transformation. They're splitting off their whole energy business. They're going to spin that off later this year, and there's a lot of transformation there. They're really trying to push that they're going to become a more focused company, and then the energy business is trying to really push, and they're going to push this on the roadshow, that they're going to become a renewable energy company. And I think the problem with that is that now for a lot of people in their minds, the first thing they think about with Siemens is going to be coal.
The interesting thing, Oliver, Merkel gave a speech on New Year's about how important it is, the climate is to her this year, and she wants to phase out coal by 2038. But now one of Germany's biggest utilities is opening a new coal plant. What's the story with Uniper?
Yeah, that's another really interesting one. The coal plant has also been targeted by activists. I think they're trying to disrupt its opening in June. And Uniper is saying that, it's a new coal plant. It'll burn more cleanly. Activists are really buying it. The big picture here, it really goes back to, Germany's nuclear exit when that was suddenly announced. And then there was a big demand for energy in Germany, and the easiest way to get that right now is still coal. And so we basically took, one step forward and two steps back in terms of, greenhouse emissions. And then, and now the idea of slowly scaling back that coal is taking hold, but it's slow going, and the demand for energy hasn't stopped. So they're, the Uniper is trying to supply their energy. It's the easiest and probably cheapest way they can do that. And as long as Merkel doesn't forbid it, I think that's where they're going to focus on.
Yeah, but they say obviously it's cleaner than what went before, and they say that it's only for 20 years or so. But the debate around coal clearly very active domestically in Germany, and then in the broader international context into Australia. Oliver, thank you very much. Bloomberg reporter Oliver Sachs-Gow with those interesting stories on energy and Germany.
Let's get over to Roger Herring now for your global news headlines. Roger?
Thanks, mate. Yes, let's start in Taiwan, where President Tsai Ing-wen has won a landslide victory over her opposition challenger to clinch a second term in elections on Saturday. Bloomberg's Samson Ellis says her win has dashed the Chinese President Xi's unification hopes.
She secured 57% of the ballots with a record-high number of votes. The result gives Tsai a strong mandate to resist China's pressure on the island, leaving Chinese President Xi Jinping's stated goal of bringing Taiwan under Beijing's control further out of reach. Investors were generally positive on the outcome, sending the benchmark TAIEX to a 0.6% gain. In Taipei, Samson Ellis, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
Now to the Philippines, where thousands of people are being evacuated after a volcano erupted just 40 miles south of the capital. It's triggered earthquakes and spewed ash across Manila. Financial markets are suspended, and experts warn a, quote, hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours today. There are emergency plans to move up to 200,000 people. South Africa's ruling party has said tackling the nation's power crisis is one of its policy priorities for the year ahead. Bloomberg's Paul Richardson reports.
It plans to do so by allowing more private companies to generate electricity and diversifying its sources of energy. Speaking at the party's annual anniversary celebrations on Saturday, President Cyril Ramaphosa also vowed not to let the state power company fail. The utility has about $31 billion of debt, isn't generating enough revenue to cover its costs, and has imposed rolling blackouts that are pulling the economy into a recession. In Johannesburg, Paul Richardson, Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.
And a first date that's out of this world, literally. A Japanese billionaire is planning on flying to the moon, and he's looking for the love of his life to join. The catch? He hasn't found her yet. He's the first paying customer on SpaceX's maiden tourist voyage to the moon in 2023, and he's taking applications to join him. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Herring. This is Bloomberg. Anna.
Wow, those with suitable risk appetite should apply then. Roger, thank you very much. And now with the morning sports news, here's William Essler.
Manchester City's Sergio Aguero broke 2 Premier League records yesterday in their 6-1 win over Aston Villa. He now has the most hat-tricks in the division's history and the most goals by a non-English player. Watford are out of the Premier League's relegation zone for the first time all season. They were 3-0 winners at Bournemouth yesterday, and the points moved them to 17th in the table. A frenetic South Wales derby between Cardiff and Swansea finished goalless in the Championship yesterday. The point was enough to move the visitors to the capital up to 7th in the table, outside of the playoff spots only on goal difference. Cardiff are 12th, 4 points off the top 6. And Leicester are through to the quarter-finals of Rugby Union's European Challenge Cup. They overturned a half-time deficit to beat Cardiff 30-20 at Welford Road. For the Welsh side, their hopes of progression are now out of their own hands. Cardiff will need to beat Cavasano next Saturday and hope Leicester beat Pau to have any chance of reaching the knockout stage.
Coming up now on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, no respite. A second night of protests grip Iran after the government admits it accidentally shot down a Ukrainian passenger airliner. All 176 people on board that plane were killed. More details on how the unrest in the Middle East is developing next. And a reminder that you can listen back to a selection of our interviews at BloombergRadio.com or on your Bloomberg Business app. This is Bloomberg.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
Are you one of those people who thinks it's okay to drive stoned? I mean, what's the worst that can happen? You end up driving below the speed limit? It's no big deal, right? Wrong. The truth is, your reaction times slow way down when you're high. You not only put yourself in danger, but everyone around you. Talk about a buzzkill. Stop kidding yourself. It's not okay to drive high. If you've been using marijuana in any form, do not get behind the wheel. If you feel different, you drive different. Drive high, get a DUI. Paid for by NHTSA.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run, mix it.
Imagine yourself in an unspoiled paradise, discovering the charms of a new city, or sampling street food with the locals. Fly from London to more than 160 destinations worldwide and make 2020 a year like never before with Qatar Airways, named world's best airline by Skytrax. Our incredible selection of special fares are available now. Book today at QatarAirways.com. Qatar Airways, going places together.
Some ideas can be bad for business, like a band recording a song underwater. No radio station would ever play that song. Or like Barclaycard, making a repayment calculator that shows how a small extra repayment each month adds up to paying them much less in interest. But Barclaycard have actually made their repayment calculator, so you should definitely use it. Take control. Start today. Barclaycard. Terms and conditions apply.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Like what you're listening to? Want to make getting back to it easier? Use the favorite button to keep track of the stations and podcasts you love on TuneIn. Just tap or click the heart icon to add it to your favorites. Then find all your go-to audio under the favorites tab. Pretty easy, right?
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down. Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
On this week's On the Media, tips and tricks for how to inoculate yourself against war propaganda.
If you watch Fox News, you'll see what can be fairly characterized as war lust. I shouldn't even say Fox News alone because it does permeate everywhere. And you really got to watch out for that.
War themes and memes on this week's On the Media from WNYC. Listen to the On the Media podcast from WNYC Studios on TuneIn today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow and tune in on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on QuickTake by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg's European headquarters here in London, I'm Caroline Hepker with this Bloomberg Radio Business Flash. So European equities are drifting, at the moment slightly higher, 0.1%. And the FTSE 100 gains 0.6%, whilst the Xetra DAX gains 0.1%. Shares that are moving, Aston Martin, Lagonda, you just heard there that the global group is making a last-ditch attempt to try to get fresh funding. The share price has been higher, as much as 5.4%, currently higher, 2.1%. Also in the news, Renault is 3.5% lower after the FT reported that Nissan is intensifying the contingency planning for a possible split of the two companies post Carlos Ghosn. As for the broader markets, looking ahead to the US market open, we're up 0.4% on Dow Jones futures and similarly on S&P 500 futures. We've got really the beginning of earnings season now for the United States. JP Morgan Chase, United Health Group, Goldman Sachs, all reporting within the coming days, and also the trade deal being signed, the initial phase 1 US-China trade deal being signed on Wednesday, according to the US president. So really big stories that are expecting to hit the markets this week. In terms of the bond market and where we stand, negative 17 basis points for German benchmark yields, so up by 2 basis points, and we're also high 2 basis points on US benchmark yields on the 10-year, trading at 1.84%. As for the FX space, the yen this morning has been retreating. It drops 0.3%, 109.84. The pound plunges 0.7%, trading at 1.2971 on increased bets of a Bank of England interest rate cut, perhaps as soon as the end of this month. The Bloomberg Dollar Spot Index stronger at 0.1% as we watch gold dropping 0.9% this morning, and a slight gain for Brent crude up 0.4%. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Bloomberg's Roger Hearing with more what's going on around the world. Good morning.
Good morning, Caroline. Mass protests in Iran for a second night after the government admits it accidentally shot down a Ukrainian jet. It follows days of denying it had anything to do with the incident. The Iranian army says the plane was near a sensitive military site and human error was to blame. Tehran says the victims' families will be compensated. Many shortcomings, that's the conclusion of a report into the Hong Kong police's conduct during recent unrest. The Hong Kong Economic Journal says the investigation has found a lack of communication and no clear guidelines when firing tear gas. The report hasn't yet been officially released. It could be made public in the next few weeks. And Prince Harry will try to work out plans for his future with Meghan alongside the Queen, Prince William and Prince Charles later. Their unprecedented meeting follows the couple's announcement that they're stepping back as senior royals. It's added to speculation about a family rift. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Roger Hearing. This is Bloomberg. Matt.
Roger, thanks very much. Now, coming up next, our colleagues in the U.S. are getting ready for Bloomberg Daybreak, and we are going to check in with Nathan Hager to see what he's got planned for us. Good morning, Nathan.
Good morning, Matt. Well, we're starting with that reversal in Iran. Roger just mentioned that admission that Iran did mistakenly down that Ukrainian flight has protesters now demonstrating against their own government. It was only a few days ago the protests were against the U.S. for the killing of Iran's top general. So we continue to monitor a volatile situation there. We're also watching the pound with those weaker than expected GDP numbers potentially fueling a debate already underway over rate cuts at the Bank of England. And we are getting ready for the start of earnings season this week. Wall Street's biggest banks kick things off. Jeffrey Yu of UBS will be with us to give us his read on whether this bull market still has room to run. So join me and Karen Moscow for all that coming up here on Bloomberg Daybreak. Matt.
Nathan, thanks very much. Nathan and Karen coming up next if you're listening on Sirius XM, channel 119. If you're listening on London DAB digital radio, you'll hear Bloomberg Surveillance.
Now, Matt, back to one of our top stories. Anti-government protesters, as we were just hearing from Nathan, have rallied in Iran for a second night. That's after Tehran admitted its military accidentally shot down that Ukrainian jetliner. The Iranian army blamed human error days after denying it had anything to do with the incident that killed 176 people. For more on this story, we cross now to Dubai, where Bloomberg reporter Golnar Matavelli joins us. And Golnar, you spend a lot of your time in Iran, of course. I wonder if you could help us understand the relative size of the constituencies in various things here. I mean, what sort of size of protests are we talking about when it comes to protesting against the government over the shooting down of the plane versus the size of the protests against the killing of Qasem Soleimani? What are some of the numbers behind these headlines?
Well, the funeral ceremonies and the mourning processions for Soleimani were much bigger. I mean, they were in the millions. I've seen some estimates, some independent estimates in Iran, but also I think it was quite clear from the footage we saw that there were probably around 2 million people, between 2 to 3 million people in Tehran for the Qasem Soleimani processions, and other cities in Iran were the attendance was extremely high. What we've been seeing in Tehran and a couple of other cities over the past couple of nights is not on that scale at all. And the reason for that is because Iranians know that when they want to protest something in the streets, if it's not if it's not to do with a rally or a state-sponsored rally that's sanctioned by the state, then they are likely to have some kind of run-in with security forces. And that's indeed what happened last night and the night before. People came out for a candlelight vigil for the people who were killed in the plane crash on January the 8th, last Wednesday. And soon, I think their anger obviously was just too much for them to contain, and they were chanting slogans against the Islamic Republic, against their leadership. And soon enough, large amounts of security forces came into these areas. There was very limited pockets around universities. I think the universities and students have been very exercised over this because so many of these passengers were students of elite universities in Iran, and the security forces came out and pushed back with tear gas. And we heard some reports last night, but unconfirmed, nothing we've been able to verify, that in Tehran live rounds were fired as well to disperse crowds. So they're very different displays of mass public gathering. One is very much sanctioned by the state, although it prompted also a huge amount of spontaneous attendance. From the numbers we can say that, I think.
And death.
And what happened
and deaths, right? I mean, and people were stampeded to death. So I think 56 people lost their lives in the Soleimani stampedes. What's the likelihood, Golnar, that this 40-year-old regime is toppled? Is there anything pointing to that as a possibility, or is this just a little bit of unrest that is not unusual?
Well, I don't think there are any signs that the current system that's in place is going anywhere. And again, I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that over the decades, the state system has worked to try and develop a very strong security infrastructure with a large personnel, with a large the security forces are very big in Iran. The state is ultimately quite strong in that respect because it's heavily guarded and heavily protected. That's been quite deliberate over many years.
It seems we're having some problems with Golnar's line, so I'll jump in there. Bloomberg reporter Golnar Matavelli joining us there, discussing the latest from Iran. Let's talk about how this is playing out in oil markets, that Middle East tension expressed in oil markets, of course, over the last week or so. Bloomberg oil strategist Julian Lee is with us. Julian, has the price spike been done? That is the story we have seen it, or does this go further depending on how things play out in the Straits of Hormuz and in Iraq?
I think undoubtedly it will go further depending on how things play out. At the moment, the market, I think, has reacted to the Iranian retaliation, which I think has been seen as having been extremely measured. Great care taken not to target US personnel at the bases that were fired upon. And I think that oil markets, for the moment, are very complacent about what's going on in the Middle East. Oil prices now are back below where they were when before the attack that killed General Soleimani, and really back where they were before OPEC announced that it would make deeper cuts during the first quarter of this year.
So why is that? Is that just that the U.S. ramps up production every time these prices spike up?
No, I don't think it is about the US. I think, we have this, I think, slight misconception that the US ramps up production in some way whenever there are tensions. I don't think it quite works like that. The production plans of the US companies are pretty well set in advance. Yes, the shale oil is shorter cycle than traditional deep water oil fields, which may take 5 or 6 years to bring on stream. But, even so, a new shale well takes weeks or months to bring on stream. It's not something you can do overnight. This is about a lack of fear over disruption in the Middle East.
Okay, thanks very much, Bloomberg oil strategist Julian Lee, bringing us the latest on the oil markets. This is Bloomberg.
Family properties and investments have been passed to the next generation, but while
Welcome to Nuffield Health Battersea, a gym built around you. You get regular health MOTs to create a plan that works for you, with physios and personal trainers on site. You'll find a wide range of equipment and classes, and our expert team will support you to get the most out of your health, fitness, and your membership. Join today to get the rest of the month free. Search Nuffield Health. Specialists in you. 12-month commitments only. Facilities stated are in most gyms. Visit nuffieldhealth.com/terms.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up, lift. Mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run. Mix it.
Capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, January 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Protests break out in Iran after the government admits to mistakenly downing a Ukrainian plane.
U.S. futures gain and China's currency strengthens as a trade delegation from Beijing arrives in Washington.
And the pound weakens with traders moving up bets for a rate cut from the Bank of England.
The head of Human Rights Watch is barred from entering Hong Kong, plus House Speaker Pelosi on the Senate Majority Leader.
Dismissing is a cover-up.
I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Packers held on, beat the Seahawks to advance to the NFC Championship game. The Chiefs move on to the AFC after a wild win over the Texans. Home wins for the Knicks, Nets, and Devils.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
And good Monday morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. futures gaining to start the week. We're coming up to 5:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 13 points this morning. Dow futures up 125, and NASDAQ futures up 48. The DAX in Germany's up about 0.2%. The CAC in Paris up 1/3%, and the FTSE 100 is up 0.6%. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 1.84%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. COMEX gold is down 0.7% or $11.10 at $15.49 an ounce. The euro 1.1114 against the dollar and the yen 109.85. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with protests in Iran after the government admitted to mistakenly downing a Ukrainian plane last week. The admission has garnered global condemnation, including from Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
What Iran has admitted to is very serious. Shooting down a civilian aircraft is horrific. Iran must take full responsibility.
Exactly why Iran mistook the passenger jet for a cruise missile is unclear. Safeguards for surface-to-air missiles are supposed to prevent mistaken identity, and all of them appear to have failed.
Iranians flooded the streets in response. Videos on social media show clashes between protesters and riot police, chants of opposition to Iran's supreme leader, and trails of blood on the street. We get more from Bloomberg's Zaneb Fatah in Dubai.
So far, these demonstrations are large within the universities. We are hearing about demonstrations in Mashhad and other places, but we don't have a sense of how widespread throughout the country are these protests. And protesters are super angry about the number of people who died, Iranians, and the initial cover-up that the government started with, basically not taking responsibility for its mistake. And so far, we have not seen any resignations. We have not seen any of the top leadership thrown out of the government. No blame officially, and that's angering the protesters even more.
President Trump is voicing support for the protesters with tweets in both English and Farsi, warning Iran's leaders not to interfere with demonstrations.
Well, now, despite the unrest in Iran, energy markets are calm. Oil remains steady after the biggest weekly drop in 6 months, and it could stay that way. International Energy Agency Director Fatih Birol says demand is weakening as crude floods the market.
We expect 2020 there will be a surplus of more than 1 million barrels per day looking for buyers.
Well, barring any unexpected events, the IEA director sees little room for oil to move higher. Checking prices now, West Texas Intermediate is little change to higher, up just 4 cents to $59.08 a barrel. Brent is up by 5 cents to $65.03.
In the UK, the pound is weaker as traders move up bets for a rate cut from the Bank of England. Data show the British economy shrank 1/3% in November, and BOE member Gert-Jan Fliege tells the Financial Times he will vote to lower rates this month if there's no sign of improvement. We get more from Bloomberg FX and rate strategist Richard Jones.
It's a very concerted communication effort from the Bank of England. They're actually really going out of their way to tell the market rates are coming lower, and the market did shift those expectations from December, where we had a sort of a 50-50 chance of a rate cut, to now that being in May.
And again, the pound weaker against the dollar at 1.2964.
A delegation from China arrives in Washington today with plans to sign a Phase 1 trade agreement on Wednesday. Optimism on that front helped boost stocks in Asia. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. China's yuan strengthened to a 5-month high, punching past 6.9 to the dollar in both the on- and offshore markets ahead of this week's planned trade deal signing with the US. The CSI 300 was up almost 1%. In Taiwan, stocks traded near 30-year highs, while the Taiwanese dollar held at its strongest level against the greenback since June 2018, following President Tsai's resounding re-election win. And some positive signs on the Korean economy, with semiconductor shipments rising 12% in the first 10 days of January from a year earlier. The won rose to a 6-month high, and the Kospi closed at its best level since April 2019. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Back here in the U.S., this week is all about bank earnings. Starting tomorrow, results start rolling in from the nation's 6 largest lenders, and we get more now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Bank stocks are coming off of their best year in more than 2 decades, outpacing the broader market with a 36% surge in 2019. And fourth quarter profits at the 6 biggest American lenders set for release this week will help them challenge the annual record of $120 billion set in 2018, according to analyst estimates. Strong consumer units and corporate tax cuts are fueling the gains, but there are warning signs. Estimates for 2020 are for a combined profit drop of $10 billion as global interest rates remain stubbornly low and geopolitical tensions stay high. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, thanks, Charlie. Meantime, Goldman Sachs is planning a big expansion in China. We get details on that now live from Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And Nate, sources tell us Goldman plans to double its staff in China to 600 people. It's part of the 5-year plan using relaxed rules in China to take control of a joint venture it set up with a Chinese securities firm in 2004. Goldman intends to add to its advisory, markets, and merchant banking operations and sees a huge opportunity to be an asset manager. And they're hoping it doesn't stop there. Banks such as Goldman are looking for new regulatory and legal frameworks in China that will let them sell more sophisticated products and services. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. And S&P futures are higher, up 13 points. Dow futures up 122. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
All right, Karen, thank you. It is 5:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with a check of what else is going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Hong Kong has denied the Human Rights Watch executive director entry. Kenneth Roth did not find out until he got to Hong Kong International Airport yesterday. Roth was planning to hold a press conference in Hong Kong on Wednesday to detail his organization's latest world report describing what they see as China's undermining of international human rights.
So I'm going to return to New York. I'll hold the press conference there. But sadly, this episode is just the latest evidence that the Chinese government is doing everything it can to undermine the enforcement of international human rights standards.
The move happened as Hong Kong residents continue pro-democracy protests. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows a majority of Americans are not happy with President Trump's handling of the situation with Iran. According to the survey, 52% say they feel less safe after the January 3rd killing by the U.S. of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says delaying sending the articles of impeachment to the Senate produced a positive result. Pelosi says she fears Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will not follow through on his oath of office to provide a fair impeachment trial after signing a resolution to dismiss the charges. Pelosi on ABC's This Week says dismissing is a cover-up.
We feel very proud of the courage of our members to vote to impeach the president. There's nothing the Senate can do that can ever erase that.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the delay in sending the articles of impeachment passed by the House will have no effect on the outcome of the president's trial in the GOP-controlled Senate.
This trial will end in a matter of days, not weeks, and he's going to be acquitted. I hope every Republican votes to acquit, and I think some Democrats will too.
Trump was charged with abuse of power for pressuring the president of Ukraine to investigate Democrats. Evacuations are underway in the Philippines, where an erupting volcano 40 miles south of Manila has triggered about 75 earthquakes. The volcano has closed Manila Airport. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. 5:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashower.
Nathan, it'll be the 49ers and Packers for the NFC Championship. Two teams who've together won 9 Super Bowls. The AFC title game will be the Titans and Chiefs. They've collectively only won 1. That was Kansas City 50 years ago. The Chiefs haven't been back to the Super Bowl since. They've had multiple playoff disappointments, and it looked like yesterday would be another. A nightmarish start had them trailing Houston 24-0. KC then scored touchdowns on the next 7 possessions. They went from down 24 to up 20. They beat the Texans 51-31. Patrick Mahomes, 5 touchdown passes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't want to be in that spot, but the biggest thing that I think I was preaching to the team was let's go do something special. Let's go do something special. Everybody's already counting us out. Let's just go play by play and just put our best effort out there. And I mean, obviously I knew as a team we had to kind of everything had to go the right way, but I thought the defense stepped up, special teams stepped up. Offensively, we started making the plays we weren't making, and play by play, we just chipped away at that lead.
Packers led Seattle by 18. Seahawks got to within 5 but never got the ball back, and Aaron Rodgers passed to Devontae Adams for a first down, sealed Green Bay's 28-23 win. Adams scored 2 TDs. Cleveland Browns' new head coach will be Kevin Stefanski. He was an assistant in Minnesota. Former Giants coach Pat Shurmur landed a job coaching the offense in Denver. Miami Heat having a great season, but a rough weekend in New York. Friday, they blew a lead in Brooklyn. They were up 14 at the Garden. The Knicks with maybe their best win of the year, 124-121. Nets back at Barclays. They beat Atlanta 108-86. Kyrie Irving, 21 points as he returned from the shoulder injury. The Devils fired general manager Ray Shero, then upset Tampa Bay 3-1. The Lightning had won 10 in a row. With the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update, I'm John Stamshower. Nathan?
And John, one other casualty of the Chiefs' offensive explosion against the Texans yesterday, fireworks. The Chiefs apologized to their fans for running out of them because they scored too much. Kansas City tallied 51 points, including touchdowns on 7 straight offensive drives. That is an explosive offense in more ways than one. S&P futures higher by 12 points right now. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA/SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Boredom, fitness enemy #1. So don't just run. Mix it up, skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift, mix it up, lift, mix it up, run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up, run, mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run.
Mix it. Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status. Phase policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
Stace, are you ready yet? Have you seen the Butlins lineup? I was born ready. We're going big tonight. Raxu then Brainiac live.
Those experiments will blow the boys' socks off.
They're wearing flip-flops, Joe, not socks.
Oh, dance shoes tomorrow though for the Diversity Dance Academy. I am going to throw some shapes.
Are you sure about that?
It's a lot easier when you're not on ice.
Well, if anyone could teach you to dance, it's going to be Diversity. Come on, we're going to be late.
The Butlins January sale is now on. You can save up to 40% on all family breaks. Book online now. Are you ready to Butlins?
Conversations from Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Tesla CEO Elon Musk had something to celebrate. Tesla has kicked off production in China, and the company handed over the first China-made Model 3 sedans to the public. And now Tesla's growth potential in the country, it's exciting Wall Street. So still with us, it is Gene Munster of Loop Ventures. So Gene, I have to ask, again, as you sort of saw that big jump in China and the big sort of success in China, is that what you had predicted, or were they more successful than perhaps you thought they would be?
Move faster than what I thought. They had set that expectation of the Gigafactory in Shanghai being open by the end, producing cars by the end of 2019, just given Tesla's history of missing its targets. I had expected that to be sometime in the first quarter. Even at that, they did it in a year, which is remarkable, and give them credit for doing that. I think when you take a step back and think about what does that mean for the company more broadly this year, the analysts overall are kind of thinking somewhere between 30 and 100,000 vehicles from the Shanghai. But at the current rate, the current capacity, and this is surprising, is it's already producing 3,000 vehicles per week. So it can produce 150,000.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are rising this morning, along with Asian shares and European stocks. Well, they're little change as investors show mild optimism at the start of a busy week set to be dominated by the beginning of earnings season and the signing of a partial China trade deal. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 12 points this morning. Dow futures up 115, NASDAQ futures up 43. The DAX in Germany is little change. 10-year Treasury down 5/30 seconds. Yield 1.83%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. NYMEX crude oil little change, down 3 cents at $59.01 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.6% or $9.80 at $15.50.30 an ounce. The euro 1.1118 against the dollar. British pound 1.2973, and the yen is at 109.87. And sources tell Bloomberg that Nissan Motor executives have examined the possibility of breaking away from Renault amid concerns that relations with the longtime French partner have turned dysfunctional after the ouster of former chief Carlos Ghosn. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael, good morning.
Good morning, Karen. Iran witnessed a second night of protests, some violent after the government admitted it had mistakenly downed a Ukrainian passenger jet. Videos posted on social media showed clashes between protesters and riot police and chants in opposition to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Meanwhile, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau says the country will work with our partners to ensure that a full, transparent investigation is conducted. Trudeau spoke at a memorial in Edmonton for the dozens of citizens killed in the crash. In the NFL playoffs, the Packers advanced to the NFC final, beating the Seahawks 28-23. The Chiefs advanced to the AFC final, beating the Texans 51-31. In the NBA, the Knicks and Nets won. The Wizards lost, along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
All right, Michael, thank you. It's 5:19 on Wall Street, and live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak. And Jeffrey Yu is back with us this morning, Chief Investment Officer at UBS. As we get ready for the kickoff of earnings season this week, Jeff, what are your expectations of what we'll see from corporates in the fourth quarter?
Well,
Well, so at this point, any signs or any further signs of stabilization would really be welcome. So rather than backward-looking in earnings data, we really need to look at any of the forward guidance, coming through, because if you look at how markets perform, what was priced in was a lot of stabilization, especially on the trade front, and the hope that could lead to stronger demand, be it on the household side, or just in terms of a global cyclical stabilization or even an upswing. So let's see if we can get some confirmation of that. That would do the sustainability of this rally a whole world of good.
So what are your expectations? Are you thinking that we will see forward guidance picking up with that phase one trade deal getting signed this week?
I really think it's a mix of things, right now, because as we know in the US, the economy is actually less exposed to the global side of it. Actually, one of the reasons, and we are overweight the US, right now, say relative to Europe, where we're underweight, is because you have less of an exposure to global trade, less of an exposure to such headwinds as opposed to Europe. So I think the overall outlook is still going to be more positive on the US side compared to the rest of the world, but also just looking at the broader global earnings picture. Let's see how emerging markets are showing as well. So I think looking for steady news from the US, but in terms of upside surprises, maybe a bit from Europe, especially, and from EM as well.
Now, we did get GDP numbers from the UK this morning. Unexpected shrinking of the economy there. What could that mean for the Bank of England as it continues with this debate over whether to cut rates?
Right, so firstly, it's still in the monthly GDP numbers, so let's wait for the quarterly numbers to come through. It's very clear that the balance of rhetoric has shifted more towards cuts, rather than stabilization or even hikes, which maybe some courses were looking for in the wake of the December election. So that does come as a bit of a surprise. If I look at some of the other numbers right now, manufacturing production, industrial production in November, all surprising to the downside. But bearing in mind, all November numbers heading into what was a period of uncertainty. So I think the BOE will be willing to stagger things out a bit, see whether, again, the global conditions, that we have talked about earlier, and domestic uncertainty, will that actually start to come through? And bearing in mind, in March, we may have a relatively expansionary budget in the UK as well. So the jury's still out there. But again, the BOE, it looks like they are on course, for easing rates, at some point, especially if such numbers continue.
If we start to see more liquidity in the United Kingdom, could that make risk assets in the UK more attractive for you?
It's a double-edged sword, really. So, firstly, if growth starts to pick up, and we know the market is still, trying to get back into the UK after, I would say, over 3 years of uncertainty and underweight. So that certainly, coupled with monetary stimulus, would be a positive. But on the other hand, any hints of, let's say, stabilization in numbers, and then sterling would actually start to strengthen again, and that is quite a headwind for earnings in the UK. So a balanced approach is necessary, but given the rhetoric right now and the numbers, I just question whether the market's jumping to conclusions relatively quickly, because we do have, again, a relatively expansionary budget anticipated in March, and that could offset some of the headwinds right now.
What markets do you see outperforming in this trade environment now with the phase one deal coming into effect?
Well, it's really quite a balanced environment right now, because, again, as I mentioned, we do see EM probably as the outperformer right now, but we also have to take into account where the positioning is as well. If you look at some sectors in Europe, industrials, for example, because the bar is so low right now, to actually surprise them to the upside, and we've seen it across Europe last year as well. As under positioning, the bar is relatively low. So if on the trade side we do see some stabilization as well, then all of these cyclically exposed sectors, they could do well. But bearing in mind, we still see a lot of uncertainty this year, so we still favor consumer over corporates, and domestically driven economies and indices over internationally exposed ones. So over, I'd say, a 6 to 12 month tactical horizon, we're still looking for the US to actually outperform.
All right, Jeff, thanks as always. That's Jeffrey Yu, Chief Investment Officer at UBS, joining us this morning on Bloomberg Daybreak as we take a look at the markets right now. Futures on Wall Street pointing to a higher open there. European stocks drifting this morning. S&P futures higher by almost 13 points now. Dow futures up 120. NASDAQ futures a gain of 45 points. DAX in Germany's little changed. CAC in Paris up about 0.25%. 10-year Treasury yield 1.84%. and you're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
This is a Bloomberg Money Minute. U.S.-China trade takes the spotlight this week with a signing ceremony on a Phase 1 deal set for Wednesday at the White House. Investors are also looking ahead to the kickoff of fourth quarter earnings, with several banks reporting results for the final 3 months of last year. None today, but tomorrow we hear from Citigroup, J.P. Morgan Chase, and Wells Fargo. Two suppliers to Boeing are getting together, creating one of the world's biggest aerospace and defense supply companies. Colorado-based Woodward will combine with Connecticut-based Hexcel in an all-stock deal that gives Woodward a controlling stake in the merged entity. Looks like a higher open for Wall Street on this Monday, with stocks near all-time highs and stock futures pointing to more gains. Dow futures up 120 points. And the online mattress seller Casper, which pioneered the so-called bed-in-a-box, has filed for a U.S. IPO. The New York-based company founded in 2014 reports growing revenue and losses amid more and more competition from imitators. Gina Cervetti, Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
The Honda Jazz, the car that feels fabulously small on the outside, yet deceptively big on the inside, with its incredible storage solutions and magic folding seats. Not to mention the suite of advanced safety features. And now with the small but big Jazz event, it's available with 0% APR representative and 5 years complimentary servicing until January 31st. Visit your local dealer to find out more. Honda dealers are credit brokers, not lenders. Finance provided by Honda Finance Europe, authorized and regulated by the Financial Conduct Authority. Terms and conditions apply.
Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Got big plans for 2020? Capture and share every highlight on a gorgeous iPhone 11 with an ultra-wide camera. In Tesco Mobile's big January sale, you can get the latest iPhone for £40.75 a month with double data. That's a mighty 20 gigs. Go in store or search Tesco Mobile. Tesco Mobile. Every little helps.
Ends 26th of January. Was 10 gigs, now 20 gigs. 36-month credit and rolling monthly usage agreements with Tesco Mobile required. Subject to status phase. Policy applies. See tescomobile.com/terms.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Ah, finally another commercial, said no one ever. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade now and get over 45 commercial-free music stations.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Daybreak.
It's 5:30 on Wall Street. Good morning. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're just about 4 hours away from the opening of U.S. trading. Let's get you up to date on the news you need to know at this hour. U.S. futures are higher to start a week, highlighted by bank earnings and U.S.-China trade developments. Iran is also in focus after admitting to mistakenly downing a Ukrainian plane last week. That's garnered condemnation from governments around the world. And here with more is Bloomberg's Maria Tadeo.
The Iranians are getting a lot of heat now because of that plane that was shot down and the fact this is so tragic that this was done in a way that really raises many question marks. It's definitely not a good thing for Iran.
And protests have broken out across Iran after the government admitted striking down that passenger jet. Videos on social media show clashes between protesters and riot police and trails of blood on the street. We get details from Bloomberg's Zeneb Fatah in Dubai.
Protesters are super angry about the number of people who died and the initial cover-up that the government started with, basically not taking responsibility for its mistake. And so far, we have seen no blame officially, and that's angering the protesters even more.
President Trump is voicing support for the protesters with tweets warning Iran's leaders not to interfere with demonstrations.
Meantime, a delegation from China arrives in Washington today with plans to sign a Phase 1 trade agreement on Wednesday. Optimism on that front has China's currency strengthening, with the yuan breaching 6.9 per dollar for the first time since August.
The pound is weakening as traders move up bets for a rate cut from the Bank of England. Data show the British economy shrank 0.3% in November. BOE member Gert-Jan Fliege tells the Financial Times he will vote to lower rates this month if there's no sign of improvement. And checking sterling now, it is weaker against the dollar at 129.78.
It's a big week for U.S. banks. Earnings start rolling in from the largest lenders tomorrow. Bank stocks are coming off their best year in 2 decades, posting a 36% gain in 2019.
Meantime, Goldman Sachs is planning a big expansion in China. We get details on that live from Bloomberg's John Tucker. John.
Yeah, Nathan, sources tell us Goldman has a 5-year plan in place that calls for doubling its staff in China to 600 people. They're taking advantage of new rules that let Wall Street banks expand across that country. Infused with hundreds of millions of dollars in new capital, Goldman plans to take control of a joint venture it set up with a Chinese securities firm in 2004. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are higher, up about 13 points. Dow futures up 121 and NASDAQ futures up 44. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 seconds, yield 1.84%. And the yield on the 2-year, 1.57%. NYMEX crude oil is now down about 0.1%. It's at $58.99 a barrel. Straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. And this is Bloomberg.
Thanks, Karen. It's 5:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Nathan. The executive director of Human Rights Watch says that he was prevented from entering Hong Kong, where he intended to release a report critical of the Chinese government. Kenneth Roth said in a video posted on Twitter that he had planned to hold a news conference Wednesday to release the rights group's annual world report.
Sadly, as I arrived here, the Chinese government decided it didn't want to let me in. So even though I've been able to enter Hong Kong freely before, this time, for the first time, they blocked me.
The move happened as Hong Kong residents continue pro-democracy protests. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi said it was unusual for her counterpart in the Senate, Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, to back a resolution aimed at dismissing the impeachment case against President Trump. Pelosi says dismissing is a cover-up. House Speaker Pelosi also says the Trump administration has not been straight with Congress about the U.S. drone strike that killed Iran's top general. Pelosi on ABC's This Week.
When they called and told me, the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman of the Joint Chiefs confirmed that we were involved in this action, I said, well, you should have informed the Gang of Eight in advance of this. This leadership and the chairs of the Intelligence Committee and ranking members, House and Senate, we had to keep it close. You had to keep it close. Well, we had to keep it close because we didn't want it to get out. What you're saying is you don't trust the Congress of the United States.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Thousands of Filipinos are fleeing as a volcano is erupting 40 miles south of Manila. It has triggered about 75 earthquakes and spewed ballistic fragments, forcing Manila Airport to close. Bloomberg's Andrea Caslanzo has more from Manila.
Taal volcano, also a tourist attraction, is spewing steam and molten rock, prompting authorities to raise the second highest alert level. That means hazardous explosive eruption is possible within hours or days. Ash from the volcanic eruption reached the capital, causing the closure of government offices, stocks, foreign exchange, and bond markets. In Manila, Andrea Calonzo, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Okay, Michael, thanks. It's 5:35 on Wall Street, and it's time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John's Stash Hour.
Nathan, when the Packers play the 49ers for the NFC Championship, it'll be the 8th time in the last 25 years the teams have met in the postseason. The two combined a year ago to win only 10 games. Both have won 14 times this season. The Packers beat Seattle 28-23. Aaron Rodgers hooked up twice with Devontae Adams for touchdowns. He then threw a pass to Adams for a first down that sealed the win after the Seahawks had come from 18 down to close to within 5.
Yeah, it's a special feeling. That's kind of what we talked about in the huddle before the last drive. These are the moments that you work for and you think about in the offseason, the chance to put a game away. And like I've said, most of the year, as you guys have talked about the aesthetics of our wins. It doesn't have to be pretty, but what we've done is closed out games the right way.
Earlier, a bizarre game in Kansas City. Houston led 24-0 in the second quarter, but the Chiefs, with 4 touchdown passes by Patrick Mahomes in a span of 10 minutes, had the lead by halftime, went on to win 51-31. Both Travis Kelce and Damian Williams scored 3 TDs. The AFC title game, Tennessee at Kansas City. Kevin Stefanski will be the new head coach in Cleveland. He was Minnesota's offensive coordinator. The Giants' defensive coordinator will be Patrick Graham. He had been in Miami. Before that, Graham was on the staff in New England with new Giants coach Joe Judge. At the Garden, big comeback by the Knicks, down 14. They rallied past Miami, 124-121. Julius Randle, 26 points as the Knicks end a 5-game losing streak. At Barclays, welcome back Kyrie Irving. His first game in 2 months. He scored 21. The Nets beat Atlanta 108-86. The Devils, who recently made a coaching change, have now fired their GM Ray Shero. They then beat Tampa Bay 3-1. The Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stash Hour. Nathan?
All right, John, thank you. It's 5:37 on Wall Street, and the latest edition of Bloomberg Business Week is on newsstands now with the cover on the hidden dangers of the index fund takeover. Also in this week's issue, why tensions between the U.S. and Iran could soon crop up again. Peter Coy wrote the story for Bloomberg Business Week.
Trump is famous for saying, if somebody hits you, hit him back 10 times as hard. And it's worked pretty well for him in the world of business and politics. The question is now, will it work as well in the world of geopolitics? And, so far you could argue so good.
You can read more about this and other stories in this week's edition of Bloomberg Business Week on newsstands now and online at businessweek.com. Terminal customers can receive a complimentary subscription at MAG Go and listen to Business Week with Carol Massar and Jason Kelly weekdays at 2 p.m. Wall Street time on Bloomberg Radio. It's 5:38 on Wall Street, and that's time for the Tri-State Business Report. Here's Bloomberg's Ed Corey. Good morning, Ed.
Hi, Nathan. Lawmakers in Albany have presented an array of limousine reforms they hope will increase passenger safety. Among the provisions, stretch limos would have to be fitted with seat belts, and drivers would have to hold commercial license and undergo drug and alcohol testing when driving with 9 passengers or more. Several single-use plastic items have been banned in Long Branch, New Jersey. A measure adopted by the city council prohibits plastic bags, food containers, and other items. They were singled out because they're not recycled and they can end up in the waste system or as litter. Atlantic Broadband is buying Thames Valley Communications, a broadband service firm operating in southeastern Connecticut. The $50 million purchase is subject to approvals and expected to close in about 3 months. That's your Bloomberg Tri-State Business Report. I'm Ed Corey. Nathan?
Thanks, Ed. It's 5:39 on Wall Street. Bloomberg Radio is on the air from San Francisco to New York, London to Hong Kong. Let's check in with our global news team for some of the top stories heard on our 300 affiliate radio stations around the world.
I'm Gina Cervetti, and on WBBM in Chicago, I'm reporting that the former CEO of Boeing, who stepped down in the wake of 2 fatal crashes, is denied severance but gets to keep almost $81 million in past pay. I'm
Caroline Hepke on Bloomberg DAB Digital Radio in London. We're reporting on James Bond's on-screen favourite, Aston Martin, as it reportedly struggles to secure new funding.
I'm Courtney Donahoe on KTRH in Houston. Oil drilling in American fields has dropped to the lowest in almost 3 years.
I'm Ed Corey on WWJ in Detroit. I'm reporting sources tell Bloomberg Nissan executives have looked at breaking away from Renault.
And those are some of the stories our 2,700 Bloomberg journalists and analysts are working on this morning around the world. And another story we're watching in the auto industry, Porsche is defying the car industry slump by reporting record sales. The sports car maker says global deliveries rose 10% in 2019, driven by demand for Porsche's Macan and Cayenne SUVs. Right now, futures point to a higher open on Wall Street on this Monday morning. S&P futures are up 12 points. Dow futures a gain of 121 points. NASDAQ futures higher by 45. 10-year down 5/30 seconds. The yield 1.83%. 2-year Treasury yield 1.57%. You're listening to Bloomberg Daybreak.
Message and data rates may apply. T&C and privacy terms can be found at babbel.com/terms. Please don't text and drive.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then try Babbel for free by texting EXPLORE to 64,000. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just text EXPLORE to 64,000 and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or text EXPLORE to 64,000 and try it for free. Text EXPLORE to 64,000.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
This is your Bloomberg
Boredom, fitness enemy #1. So don't just run. Run, run. Mix it up. Skip, run, skip, run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run, lift, splash, skip, lift, run. It's crunch time. Skip, mix it up. Run, mix it up. Out of boxing class. Skip, run, splash, skip, run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run, mix it up, skip, mix it, run.
Mix it. Keys, check. Phone, check. 70s playlist downloaded? Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre, so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Did you know your favorite radio stations are in your pocket? Yes, the TuneIn app lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio anywhere you want. To see all the stations broadcasting in your area, find the local radio section on the home screen. Keep it local with TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie.
With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Lava is gushing out of a Philippine volcano after an eruption forced villagers to flee. Manila's international airport is closed. President Trump's Senate impeachment trial could begin this week and might stretch through the State of the Union address next month.
Should Trump decide to go ahead in the middle of his impeachment trial, he would follow in the footsteps of President Clinton, who delivered his 1999 State of the Union address during his impeachment trial. He discussed the economy, the federal budget, taxes, and the budget surplus. He did not mention his impeachment. Linda Kenyon, Washington.
The U.S. is preparing to remove more than a dozen Saudi military students from a training program after an investigation into a deadly shooting by a Saudi aviation student at a Florida Navy base last month. Online video from Tehran purports to show Iranian police battling protesters in a crowded square. I'm John Trout.
Why all the top-tier experts? Because business is not a magic trick.
Give us a sense of the economic backdrop.
Bloomberg Markets.
Which financial records are these?
Weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and U.S. stock index futures are on the rise this morning as investors show mild optimism at the start of a busy week that's set to be dominated by the beginning of earnings season and the signing of a partial China trade deal. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up about 13 points. Dow futures up 121 and NASDAQ futures up 47. The DAX in Germany's up almost 0.1%. 10-year Treasury down 5/32, yield 1.83%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. NYMEX crude oil, little change at $59.05 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.6% or $8.70 at $15.51.50 an ounce. The euro 1.1117 against the dollar. The British pound is at 1.2991 and the yen 109.88. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Thank you very much, Karen. Anger is growing against Iran's leadership following last week's unintentional missile launch that brought down a commercial airliner, killing over 100 Iranians in the crash. Thousands flooded the streets in protests against Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. President Trump offered support to the Iranian people, tweeting in Farsi and in English, "My administration will continue to stand with you." The executive director of Human Rights Watch, Kenneth Roth, says that he was prevented from entering Hong Kong, where he intended to release a report critical of the Chinese government. In the NFL playoffs, the Packers advanced to the NFC final, beating the Seahawks 28-23. The Chiefs advanced to the AFC final, beating the Texans 51-31. In the NBA, the Knicks and Nets won. The Wizards lost, along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils won. Global news, 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg.
Bloomberg Opinion, informed perspectives, and expert data-driven commentary on breaking news.
It is 5:49 on Wall Street. Time to check in with Bloomberg Opinion, and we're joined live from our London bureau by Julian Lee, Bloomberg Opinion columnist and oil strategist, taking a look this morning at U.S. dependence on Middle Eastern oil, something that's gotten a lot of the market's attention given the tensions between the U.S. and Iran since last week. But how much dependence is there for the U.S. now, with America now a net exporter of crude, Julian?
Good morning. Actually, there's quite a lot, more than you'd imagine. The U.S. is not yet a net exporter of crude; it's a net exporter of total crude and refined products, and the exports are generally refined products. There is a significant amount of crude export, but not as much as is imported. The U.S. is the fifth biggest buyer of crude oil from the Persian Gulf countries. It's only surpassed by China, India, Japan and South Korea. And about 1 in every 8 barrels of crude oil imported into the United States comes from the Persian Gulf. So that dependence is still big in physical terms. But there's a secondary dependence, and that is the fact that the U.S. oil market is linked into global oil markets. We see the price of crude oil move pretty much in line with crude oil prices everywhere around the world. So if there is a disruption to flows out of the Middle East, even if those flows aren't going to the United States, it has an immediate impact on global crude oil prices. And perversely, because the taxation of gasoline and diesel in the US is relatively low, those fluctuations in crude oil prices feed through very quickly to US gas prices and US diesel fuel prices to a much greater extent than they do in Europe, where taxes are much higher.
Well, where do you see the trend going? You say the U.S. is a net exporter of refined crude oil. Is the amount of refined crude in the U.S. enough to offset any fluctuations we see in the global oil market?
I don't think it's going to offset those fluctuations. I mean, clearly the net exporter status of the US has a very positive impact on the balance of payments, on trade deficits broadly, although perhaps not with certain high-profile individual countries or regions. But the US is still linked into prices globally. There is no sense that the US is going to become, in some sense, completely isolated from the global supply and demand of oil, that all of the crude produced in the US is going to be refined in the US and all the products made are going to be used in the US with any surplus exported. We're always going to have flows of crude oil in and out of the country. We're always going to have flows of oil products in and out of the country, simply because every crude oil is different, and refiners need a mixture of different types of crude oil. The heavy crude oil that is good for making fuel oil and things like that, which is imported largely from Canada. It was previously imported from Venezuela, Mexico, Colombia. Obviously, there are sanctions on Venezuelan exports. Mexico and Colombia are in decline, and the balance is coming from the Middle East. So I think those interdependencies are always going to be there.
Julian Lee, Bloomberg Opinion columnist and oil strategist again, thanks for being with us this morning. And if you want to read more, Julian's column this morning is called "Trump is Wrong. The U.S. Does Need Middle East Oil." You can read that and more from Bloomberg Opinion at Bloomberg.com/opinion, or if you're a Bloomberg Terminal subscriber, just type OPIN GO in the search bar. Karen.
All right, Nathan, thank you. It is 5:53 on Wall Street. It's time for the Bloomberg Law Report, brought to you by American Arbitration Association. International trade or business dispute resolved faster with the International Center for Dispute Resolution, the leader in alternative dispute resolution around the world, ICDR.org. Let's get to the legal stories we're watching this morning from Bloomberg's Jeff Bellinger.
The National Labor Relations Board approved an offer by CNN to approve a long-running labor dispute with camera operators who accused the news organization of canceling their contract because they were unionized. The Labor Department released a final rule that narrows the situations in which multiple businesses share liability for paying workers their wages California Governor Gavin Newsom's proposed budget would expand Medicaid by making all low-income seniors eligible regardless of their immigration status.
Bloomberg Law. Everything you need on one legal research platform. Guidance, analysis, and Bloomberg Market Intelligence. Find out more at BloombergLaw.com.
And now another legal story. We're watching Carlos Ghosn's war of words with Japan's justice minister. The former Nissan executive is going after the country's legal system and its nearly 100% conviction rate by taking his case to the court of public opinion. For more on the accusations from Ghosn, Bloomberg's June Grasso speaks with Professor Stephen Solomon of the UC Berkeley School of Law.
So let's look at some of his allegations, starting with the allegation that Japanese prosecutors can grill suspects repeatedly without their lawyers present when they're in pretrial detention. Is that the case?
Yes, it is the case. And essentially, the Japanese legal system is different. It's culturally different. It's legally different than the United States. And it relies on confessions to work. And 99% of defendants confess to a crime.
Tokyo's deputy chief prosecutor said that Ghosn gave the impression he was questioned for a total of 8 hours a day, but that's not true. He said the former CEO was questioned on 70 of the days he spent in jail, about half the total, with each session lasting an average of 4 hours. So even what he's admitting to means about 280 hours of questioning by prosecutors. Is that why they get so many confessions?
Well, I am not in the room when these confessions happen, but even in the United States, there's been a trend where you have extended periods of confession that defendants will confess to things they did not do to end the confession period. And culturally, again, Japan is about apology. It's about admission. And the confession culture there jives with the legal culture. And just to think in the United States that this could happen with someone who's represented by a lawyer and invokes in the United States their right against self-incrimination is crazy. So it's clearly just a different system, and it's clearly not one that we in the United States abide by, or in fact, the Western world. But that's what Japan does, and I can understand why people would not agree with it coming from that perspective.
What about the conditions in prison? Solitary confinement, lack of prescribed medication, family not allowed to contact him. Is that part of the process there?
Yes. So solitary confinement is a big part of the confinement process in Japan. I'm not familiar with the medication or other issues, but look, U.S. prisons are not great either, but there are certain rights, and unless you're a terrorist or some immediate threat, you have right to access to your family, you have right to access to your lawyer. There is health care in our prisons. That just is not the case in many parts of the world, and Japan is one of them.
And that's UC Berkeley law professor Stephen Solomon speaking at the Bloomberg's June Grasso. Catch more of that interview, plus analysis of the latest legal news, by subscribing to the Bloomberg Law Podcast or downloading the show at Bloomberg.com/podcasts. And attorneys can find exceptional legal research and business development tools at BloombergLaw.com. S&P futures are up 12 points this morning. Dow futures up 120 and NASDAQ futures up 44. 10-year Treasury down 6/30 yield 1.84%. And the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. The euro 1.1117 against the dollar. The British pound is at 1.2987. And Bloomberg Daybreak continues. This is Bloomberg.
Influential.
Boredom, fitness enemy number one. So don't just run. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Run. Skip. Run. Give yourself a lift. Mix it up. Lift. Mix it up. Run. Lift. Splash. Skip. Lift. Run. It's crunch time. Skip. Mix it up. Run. Mix it up. Add a boxing class. Skip. Run. Splash. Skip. Run. Mix it up at Virgin Active and get stronger, fitter, faster. Join now for 12 months and pay nothing in January. T's and C's apply. Run. Mix it up. Skip. Mix it. Run.
Mix it. Keys. Check. Phone. Check. 70s playlist downloaded. Check. Nice. There's one more thing you should check before you leave. Your travel. There's a new cycleway under construction between Kensington Olympia and Brentford Town Centre. so expect delays due to lane closures at the junction of Kew Bridge Road and Chiswick High Road. Plan ahead at tfl.gov.uk. To the Mayor of London and TfL, every journey matters.
Some ideas can be bad for business, like a band recording a song underwater. No radio station would ever play that song. Or like Barclaycard, making a repayment calculator that shows how a small extra repayment each month adds up to paying them much less in interest. But Barclaycard have actually made their repayment calculator, so you should definitely use it. Take control. Start today. Barclaycard. Terms and conditions apply.
The financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, this is Bloomberg Daybreak for Monday, January 13th, 2020. Coming up this hour.
Protests break out in Iran after the government admits to mistakenly downing a Ukrainian plane.
U.S. futures gain and China's currency strengthens as a trade delegation from Beijing arrives in Washington.
And the pound weakens with traders moving up bets for a rate cut from the Bank of England.
The head of Human Rights Watch is barred from entering Hong Kong, plus House Speaker Pelosi on the Senate Majority Leader.
Dismissing is a cover-up.
I'm Michael Barr. More ahead.
I'm John Stashower in sports. The Packers held on, beat the Seahawks to advance to the NFC Championship game. The Chiefs move on to the AFC after a wild win over the Texans. Home wins for the Knicks, Nets, and Devils.
That's all straight ahead on Bloomberg Daybreak. On Bloomberg 1130 New York, Bloomberg 99.1 Washington, D.C., Bloomberg 106.1 Boston, Bloomberg 960 San Francisco, Sirius XM 119, and around the world on BloombergRadio.com and via the Bloomberg Business app.
Good morning, I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. futures are gaining to start the week. We're coming up to 6:01 on Wall Street, and we check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures are up 13 points this morning. Dow futures up 126, and NASDAQ futures up 46. The DAX in Germany is little change. The CAC in Paris up 1/3%, and the FTSE 100 up 0.5%. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.84%. The yield on the 2-year 1.57%. COMEX gold is down 0.5%. Or $8 to $15.5210 an ounce. The euro 1.1119 against the dollar. The yen 109.89. Nathan.
Karen, we begin with protests in Iran after the government admitted to mistakenly downing a Ukrainian plane last week. The admission has garnered global condemnation, including from Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau.
What Iran has admitted to is very serious. Shooting down a civilian aircraft is horrific. Iran must take full responsibility.
Exactly why Iran mistook the passenger jet for a cruise missile is unclear. Safeguards for surface-to-air missiles are supposed to prevent mistaken identity. All of them appear to have failed.
Iranians flooded the streets in response. Videos on social media show clashes between protesters and riot police, chants of opposition to Iran's supreme leader, and trails of blood on the street. We get more from Bloomberg's Zaneb Fatah in Dubai.
So far, these demonstrations are large within the universities. We are hearing about demonstrations in Mashhad and other places, but we don't have a sense of how widespread throughout the country are these protests. And protesters are super angry about the number of people who died, Iranians, and the initial cover-up that the government started with, basically not taking responsibility for its mistake. And so far, we have not seen any resignations. We have not seen any of the top leadership thrown out of the government. No blame officially, and that's angering the protesters even more.
President Trump is voicing support for the protesters with tweets in both English and Farsi, warning Iran's leaders not to interfere with demonstrations.
And despite the unrest in Iran, energy markets are calm. Oil remains steady after the biggest weekly drop in 6 months, and it could stay that way. International Energy Agency Director Fatih Birol says demand is weakening as crude floods the market.
We expect 2020 there will be a surplus of more than 1 million barrels per day looking for buyers.
Barring any unexpected events, the IEA director sees little room for oil to move higher, and right now West Texas Intermediate is higher by just 2 cents at $59.06 a barrel. Brent is higher by a penny at $64.99.
In the UK, the pound is weaker as traders move up bets for a rate cut from the Bank of England. Data show the British economy shrank 0.3% in November, and BOE member Gert-Jan Vliega tells the Financial Times he will vote to lower rates this month if there's no sign of improvement. We get more from Bloomberg FX and rate strategist Richard Jones.
It's a very concerted communication effort from the Bank of England. They're actually really going out of their way to tell the market rates are coming lower, and the market did shift those expectations from December, where we had a sort of a 50-50 chance of a rate cut, to now that being in May.
And checking sterling now at 1.2984 against the dollar.
A delegation from China arrives in Washington today with plans to sign a Phase 1 trade agreement on Wednesday. Optimism on that front helped boost stocks in Asia. Bloomberg's Juliet Sally joins us from Singapore with details. Good morning, Juliet.
Good morning, Nathan and Karen. China's yuan strengthened to a 5-month high, punching past 6.9 to the dollar in both the on- and offshore markets ahead of this week's planned trade deal signing with the US. The CSI 300 was up almost 1%. In Taiwan, stocks traded near 30-year highs, while the Taiwanese dollar held at its strongest level against the greenback since June 2018, following President Tsai's resounding re-election win. And some positive signs on the Korean economy, with semiconductor shipments rising 12% in the first 10 days of January from a year earlier. The won rose to a 6-month high, and the Kospi closed at its best level since April 2019. In Singapore, I'm Juliet Sarli, Bloomberg Daybreak.
All right, Juliet, thank you. Back here in the U.S., this week is all about bank earnings. Starting tomorrow, results start rolling in from the nation's 6 largest lenders. And we get more now from Bloomberg's Charlie Pellet.
Bank stocks are coming off of their best year in more than 2 decades, outpacing the broader market with a 36% surge in 2019. And fourth quarter profits of the 6 biggest American lenders set for release this week will help them challenge the annual record of $120 billion set in 2018, according to analyst estimates. Strong consumer units and corporate tax cuts are fueling the gains, but there are warning signs. Estimates for 2020 are for a combined profit drop of $10 billion as global interest rates remain stubbornly low and geopolitical tensions stay high. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Thanks, Charlie. Meantime, Goldman Sachs is planning a big expansion in China. We get details on that live from Bloomberg's John Tucker. Good morning, John.
And Nate, sources tell us Goldman plans to double its staff in China to 600 people. It's part of a 5-year plan using relaxed rules in China to take control of a joint venture it set up with a Chinese securities firm in 2004. Goldman intends to add to its advisory, markets, and merchant banking operations, and it sees a huge opportunity to be an asset manager on the mainland. They're hoping it doesn't stop there. Banks such as Goldman are looking for a new regulatory and legal framework in China that will let them sell more sophisticated products and services. John Tucker, Bloomberg Daybreak. Karen.
All right, John, thank you. S&P futures are higher, up 13 points. Dow futures up 127 and NASDAQ futures up 47. 10-year Treasury down 6/32, yield 1.84%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Thank you, Karen. It's 6:07 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr is here with more on what's going on around the world. Good morning, Michael.
Good morning, Nathan. Hong Kong has denied the Human Rights Watch executive director entry. Kenneth Roth didn't find out until he got to Hong Kong International Airport yesterday. Roth was planning to hold a press conference in Hong Kong on Wednesday to detail his organization's latest world report describing what they see as China's undermining of international human rights.
So I'm going to return to New York. I'll hold the press conference there. But sadly, this episode is just the latest evidence that the Chinese government is doing everything it can to undermine the enforcement of international human rights standards.
The move happened as Hong Kong residents continue pro-democracy protests. A new ABC News Ipsos poll shows a majority of Americans are not happy with President Trump's handling of the situation with Iran. According to the survey, 52% say they feel less safe after the January 3rd killing by the U.S. of Iranian General Qasem Soleimani. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi says delaying sending the articles of impeachment to the Senate produced a positive result. Pelosi says she fears Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell will not follow through on his oath of office to provide a fair impeachment trial after signing a resolution to dismiss the charges. Pelosi on ABC's This Week says dismissing is a cover-up.
We feel very proud of the courage of our members to vote to impeach the president. There's nothing the Senate can do that can ever erase that.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. Meanwhile, Republican Senator Lindsey Graham says the delay in sending the articles of impeachment passed by the House will have no effect on the outcome of the president's trial in the GOP-controlled Senate.
This trial will end in a matter of days, not weeks, and he's going to be acquitted. I hope every Republican votes to acquit, and I think some Democrats will too.
Trump was charged with abuse of power. Evacuations are underway in the Philippines, where an erupting volcano 40 miles south of Manila has triggered about 75 earthquakes. The volcano is spewing ballistic fragments and forced the nation's markets and Manila airport to close. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, Nathan.
Michael, thank you. It is 6:09 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. Here's John Stashauer.
Nathan, it'll be the 49ers and Packers for the NFC Championship. Two teams who together won 9 Super Bowls. The AFC title game, Titans and Chiefs, they've collectively only won 1, and that was Kansas City 50 years ago. Chiefs haven't been back to a Super Bowl since. They've had multiple playoff disappointments. It looked like yesterday would be another nightmarish start, had them trailing Houston 24-0. KC then scored touchdowns on the next 7 possessions. They went from down 24 to up 20. They beat the Texans 51-31. Patrick Mahomes threw 5 touchdown passes.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we didn't want to be in that spot, but the biggest thing that I think I was preaching to the team was let's go do something special. Let's go do something special. Everybody's already counting us out. Let's just go play by play and just put our best effort out there. And I mean, obviously I knew as a team we had to kind of everything had to go the right way, but I thought the defense stepped up, special teams stepped up. Offensively, we started making the plays we weren't making, and play by play, we just chipped away at that lead.
Packers led Seattle by 18. Seahawks got to within 5, never got the ball back, and Aaron Rodgers passed to Devontae Adams for a first down, sealed the 28-23 win. Adams scored 2 TDs. Minnesota assistant Kevin Stefanski will be the new head coach of Cleveland. Former Giants coach Pat Shurmur landed a job coaching the offense in Denver. The Miami Heat having a great season, but a rough weekend in New York. They blew a lead Friday in Brooklyn. They were up 14 at the Garden. The Knicks with maybe their best win of the year, 124-121. Nets back at Barclays beat Atlanta 108-86. Kyrie Irving, 21 points. He returned from his shoulder injury. The Devils fired general manager Ray Shero and then upset Tampa Bay 3-1. The Lightning had won 10 in a row. The Bloomberg NBC Sports Update. I'm John Stashauer. Nathan?
All right, John, thanks. And one other casualty of the Chiefs' offensive explosion against the Texans yesterday was a lack of literal explosions. The Chiefs had to apologize to their fans yesterday because they ran out of celebratory fireworks. They scored so much. Kansas City tallied 51 points, including touchdowns on 7 straight offensive drives. If you want an explosive offense, that would pretty much sum it up. S&P futures higher by almost 13 points now. Dow futures up 125. NASDAQ futures up 46. This is Bloomberg.
Rich is just a really good guy. The term good egg isn't enough to describe him. He's also certified organic and free range. Rich puts the cap back on everything. The toothpaste, the olive oil, the shampoo, everything. He lets his 10-year-old nephew beat him at virtual tennis, even though he can straight up slay his 10-year-old nephew in virtual tennis. When the toilet paper is running low, Rich replaces the roll on the actual holder, not just on the back of the toilet. Rich is texting and driving. Rich, no. What are you doing, Rich? I was just telling everyone how great you are. Texting and driving makes good people look bad. Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A public service announcement brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Fly with Cathay Pacific and arrive ready to make the most of the endless white beaches of Bali. Book now at cathaypacific.com. Cathay Pacific. Move beyond.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Bloomberg Television. Here's Taylor Riggs.
Bitcoin has climbed to the highest level since November after breaching the $8,000 price threshold. Concerns about an escalation in the conflict between the U.S. and Iran are seen as contributing to the rally in Bitcoin, which is not managed by a government. To discuss, we're joined by BitPay Chief Commercial Officer Sunny Singh. Thanks so much for joining us. We've been in this trading range. We're not overbought at these levels, but that key 8,000 level means we could be breaking out of this trading range. Do you see the price increase recently as technically driven?
Yeah, so great question, actually. I'm obviously not a technical trader, but again, technical and high-frequency trading is really what drives this market in Bitcoin. And anytime you have an unforeseen circumstance, like the Iran incident that happened a couple of days ago, that adds some new buyers to the market, they weren't expecting that, and that bumps it up. And that little bump, actually, in buying pressure really drives it to be up next, 20% in 2 days.
So I am shocked to hear that it's moving higher with gold and seen as a safe haven. How is that possible?
We see that happen a lot now. I don't think people actually went and sold their GE stock and all that and bought Bitcoin. But I see what happens is just a little bit of people start buying Bitcoin, and that, with the technical trading, really bumps it up and makes it go a lot higher, a lot faster.
Hear more interviews like this one on Bloomberg Television, streaming live on Bloomberg.com and on the Bloomberg mobile app. Or check your local cable listings. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. This update brought to you by EisnerAmper, named Best Global Accounting Firm for the third year in a row by HedgeWeek, a leading hedge fund industry publication. Learn more at EisnerAmper.com/FS. And futures are higher this morning, with S&P futures up about 12 points. Dow futures up 118. NASDAQ futures up 43. The DAX in Germany, little change. 10-year Treasury down 6/32. Yield 1.84%, and the yield on the 2-year 1.57%. NYMEX crude oil, little change, down 3 cents at $59.01 a barrel, and COMEX gold down 0.5% or $8 at $15.52.10 an ounce. The British pound is at 1.2979 against the dollar. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, Iran witnessed a second night of protests, some violent after the government admitted it had mistakenly downed a Ukrainian passenger jet. Videos posted on social media showed clashes between protesters and riot police and chants in opposition to Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In the NFL playoffs, the Packers advanced to the NFC final, beating the Seahawks. The Chiefs advanced to the AFC final, beating the Texans. In the NBA, the Knicks and Nets won. The Wizards lost along with the Warriors. In the NHL, the Devils won. Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg, John.
And thank you, Michael. Now 6:19 on Wall Street. We are live at the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studios, and this is Bloomberg Daybreak. Good morning. I'm John Tucker. Time now to get you set up for the trading day and the week ahead. Joining us in New York, Joe Weisenthal, head of the Americas News Desk for Bloomberg News. In London, we're joined by News Director David Merritt. And in Beijing, I'm pleased to say, we have Managing Editor Emma O'Brien. David, let's start with you. The protests in Iran, they have turned violent.
That's right. Yes, really public anger building there after the government finally admitted after 4 days of denials that it had indeed shot down this airplane with 170